Chapter 683. The imperial tutor had already guessed Tang Zheng's intentions and said, "You want me to let her go?" "Smart," Tang Zheng praised. "But if I let her go, wouldn't you regain your freedom?" The imperial tutor said unwillingly. Tang Zheng smiled but did not say anything. It was obvious that he had the imperial tutor in his grasp. The state preceptor's small eyes narrowed into slits as he stared at Tang Zheng, his eyeballs rolling around in circles. Suddenly, he said in a clear voice, "All right, I promise you, let her go." Tang Zheng was overjoyed. The move that he came up with in a hurry was indeed effective. But before he could be happy, he heard the imperial tutor continue, "But I am not an idiot. I will let you go." "What do you mean?" Tang Zheng's eyelids twitched. The imperial tutor's eyes flashed with a hint of sternness as he grabbed Wu's neck with his 5 fingers. She had no choice but to open her mouth, and a pill was immediately sent into her mouth. Tang Zheng turned pale with fright and said, "What did you feed her?" "I don't trust you, so of course I have to leave a backup plan." The imperial tutor said sternly, "She ate the heart-devouring pill. If there is no antidote, her heart will be devoured and she will die from bleeding from her 7 orifices. Tang Zheng's face was ashen as he gritted his teeth and said, "You are too ruthless." "Hee, thank you for the compliment. However, as long as you obediently tell me what I want, she will not die. I will give her the antidote." Tang Zheng's anger surged out. The imperial tutor was indeed an old fox. He was actually able to counter every move and grab onto Tang Zheng's life. "Don't use your life to threaten me. If you still want to play tricks, I won't take the things in your mind. According to my information, you are not the only cultivator in Huaxia. The cultivators are already gradually rising. It won't be too difficult for me to find someone to replace you." Tang Zheng already had no way out. "All right, then let her go first. I'll go over and let you do whatever you want with me." Tang Zheng walked towards the state preceptor again. The state preceptor unsealed Wu's acupoints and smiled as he released his hand and said, "Sure." Wu regained his freedom, his eyes filled with tears. He kept shaking his head and said, "No, why are you so stupid? I am not worth your life." Tang Zheng took 2 steps forward and arrived in front of Wu, pulling her over. Wu threw himself into her embrace and sobbed, "I won't allow you to go over. Don't go over. My life is not worth you paying so much." Tang Zheng caressed her tear-stained cheeks and revealed a brilliant smile. "Don't be silly. You have to live well and live on strong." Wu looked at him. The two of them were about the same height. Their eyes met, full of affection. She shook her head like a rattle drum and said resolutely, "Without you, can I still live in this world?" Tang Zheng's face turned cold, and said, "Be good, don't let my sacrifice go to waste. You have to take good care of my grandfather in the future." This time, Tang Zheng was determined to die, because this time, there would no longer be a miracle. The gap between him and the state preceptor was too great. It was like a chasm that could not be bridged. Moreover, Wu's life was in the hands of the state preceptor, so he had no room to resist. If Tian Chanzi was here, he would definitely scold him for being muddle-headed. How could he give up his life for a woman? This was too muddle-headed, too unwise. But Tang Zheng was not Tian Chanzi. He had his own principles and bottom line. If Wu could give up his life for her, then he could do the same. If you still want her to live, then don't be so wishy-washy. The state preceptor impatiently urged. Tang Zheng pushed Marshall away, causing Marshall to shake her head in pain, but seeing the determination in Tang Zheng's eyes, she understood that there was no turning back. Things had already reached this point, and the wood had already become a boat. She choked with sobs, looked into Tang Zheng's eyes, and said firmly, "I will definitely take good care of grandfather." With that, he raised his face and kissed Tang Zheng on the lips. Like a dragonfly skimming the surface of the water, it separated with a single touch. However, it was as if they had been electrocuted. Their eyes met and they could see something different in each other's eyes. The two of them had already had skin-to-skin contact, but this simple kiss contained a deep affection that far surpassed the previous intimate contact between the two of them. This was because the two of them had completely different states of mind. Tang Zheng pulled Wu back and resolutely walked towards the state preceptor. The state preceptor's face was filled with excitement as he clenched his fists tightly together. The moment he had been waiting for had finally arrived. Suddenly, the sound of something tearing through the air broke his good mood. A sharp arrow flew through the air and shot towards him. The arrow shone with a cold light, containing an extremely great power. The state preceptor recognized this arrow. Wasn't this the arrow that Tang Zheng had used earlier? But didn't Tang Zheng not make the slightest movement? Where did this arrow come from? He immediately turned his head to look in the direction of the arrow and saw a familiar person, Li Xiaotian. She was holding an iron bow and aiming it at him. The state preceptor was furious. This little girl actually dared to attack him. He had let her go because of the Li Palace, but she still had the guts to do so. The state preceptor was furious. The broken sword in his hand immediately slashed towards the sun-shooting arrow. Clang! The sun-shooting arrow shot towards the ground, unable to harm the state preceptor in the slightest. Humph, you dare to make a fool of yourself with such insignificant skills. Even if you are the holy maiden of the Li Palace, you can forget about leaving this place today. The state preceptor roared and reached out to grab Tang Zheng. The situation had changed and he did not want the cooked duck to fly away. As long as Tang Zheng fell into his hands, even if Tang Zheng wanted to commit suicide, he would not be able to do so. Then his goal would have been achieved. But things did not go as he wished. The heavens were not helping him. Just as he reached out, the sun-shooting arrow on the ground flew up again and shot towards his chest. This unforeseen event shocked him. He had never expected that the sun-shooting arrow, which had lost its threat, would suddenly fly up again. With Li Xiaotian's cultivation, he did not have the ability to control an arrow through the air. But the facts were the best proof. There was no room for falsehood. The threat of the sun-shooting arrow shooting towards his chest multiplied, making it impossible for him to ignore it. He couldn't even raise his broken sword to block it. Retreat. He only had this one path. Thus, he retreated. With this retreat, the distance between him and Tang Zheng was once more widened. A person appeared between him and Tang Zheng like a whirlwind, grabbing Tang Zheng's hand and urgently shouting, "Let's go." This person was Li Xiaotian. Tang Zheng hesitated. Marshall's life was still in the hands of the state preceptor. If he left just like that, wouldn't Marshall not be able to live? Moreover, how could Li Xiaotian be so kind as to save him? Could it be another conspiracy? He really felt a little scared. Li Xiaotian's cunning image had already entered his heart and he did not dare to believe it so easily. Li Xiaotian only took a glance at him and saw through his thoughts. He immediately said, "I'm here to save you. I have a way to save Marshall." Hearing that, Tang Zheng no longer hesitated. He turned around and ran. At the same time, he grabbed Marshall's hand. Like a headless fly, he ran away with large strides. Li Xiaotian angrily stomped his feet, cursing in his heart, "You ran faster than me, but you still foolishly sent yourself to death. What a complete idiot." She also hurriedly chased after him. The three of them ran as fast as lightning. Seeing this, the state preceptor was so angry that smoke almost came out of his 7 orifices. He shouted loudly, "Stop right there, I will kill all of you. None of you will be left alive." The three of them were not idiots, so they did not stop. Instead, they ran even faster, and the sun-shooting arrow had long since been taken back by Li Xiaotian. The state preceptor had already discovered that the tail of the sun-shooting arrow had a thin thread that was hard to see with the naked eye. That was why Li Xiaotian was able to control it from afar and catch him off guard. This is the Imperial Preceptor's mansion. There are formations set up by the Imperial Preceptors. Let's see where you can run to. The state preceptor was not in a hurry to chase after them because he believed that the thick fog could trap the three of them. They had already arrived at the narrow path that they came in from. In front of them was the thick fog. Li Xiaotian followed the pattern and pressed a command medallion into the whirlpool. Originally, the dense fog should have dissipated and an exit should have appeared. However, this time, there was no reaction at all. Tang Jing secretly cursed and said, "Your command medallion has lost its effectiveness. Huh, you guys run. In this Imperial Preceptor's mansion, without my permission, you guys won't be able to fly out even if you have wings." The State Preceptor laughed sinisterly. The three of them looked at each other in dismay. At the last moment, such a situation had occurred. Could it be that the heavens wanted them to die? However, the three of them were not people who would give up so easily. Seeing that the State Preceptor had caught up, the three of them turned around and rushed to the side. Hee, continue to run. Once you're exhausted, you won't need me to do anything. The State Preceptor said calmly. Whoosh whoosh, the wind whistled in their ears. The three of them did not dare to stop and rushed forward with all their might. Suddenly, a bamboo forest appeared in front of him. Tang Zheng was overjoyed. With an obstacle, he could effectively delay the State Preceptor. Thus, without any hesitation, he pulled Wu's hand and took the lead to rush into the bamboo forest. When Li Xiaotian saw the bamboo forest, a thought flashed through his mind. He immediately realized where he was and subconsciously stopped in his tracks. He blurted out, "Don't go in." However, it was already too late. Tang Zheng and Wu rushed in without hesitation, completely ignoring her words. She stomped her feet hatefully and said, "A dog biting Lu Dongbin, you don't know how to appreciate kindness. I can be considered to have been killed by you guys." Turning her head to look, the State Preceptor had already caught up. She did not dare to stay any longer. With a gust of wind under her feet, she also rushed into the bamboo forest. This bamboo forest was of course the sword forest that had caused her to suffer a loss. That was why she was so afraid. She was very clear that there were too many strange things in this sword forest, and this was also an important place in the State Preceptor's mansion. If she were to barge in, wouldn't she be like a sheep walking into a tiger's den, walking right into a trap? However, Tang Zheng's actions made her unable to think about all of this. She chased after them as fast as lightning. Looking at the two of them holding hands, she felt that it was especially dazzling. Thus, she said snappily, "Are you guys courting death? This is the sword forest of the State Preceptor's mansion. If we rush in, what if we encounter danger?" "Sword forest?" Tang Zheng raised his thick eyebrows. "What do you mean?" Chapter 684. Sword Forest, if you barge in, you won't be able to leave? Tang Zheng subconsciously thought of the array formation outside the witch tribe in the 10,000 huge mountains. Didn't it also cause people to lose their way? This is definitely a type of array formation. It's just that you're not proficient in these things, so you lost your way. Tang Zheng said solemnly. You have a way? Tang Zheng did not say too much, and said, let's take one step at a time. In any case, it's much better than facing the Imperial Advisor. Li Xiaotian thought about it and agreed, the Imperial Advisor would not let them go, although they would lose their way in the Sword Forest, but wasn't there still Tang Zheng? His identity as a cultivator might be able to turn danger into safety. Marshal, how are you feeling? Tang Zheng turned his head to look, but did not see any trace of the Imperial Advisor, so he asked with concern. I'm fine. Marshal's breathing was somewhat hurried, his face flushed red. Tang Zheng touched her forehead and said, your forehead is so hot. Li Xiaotian, didn't you say that you have the antidote? A trace of panic flashed across Li Xiaotian's eyes, and he stammered, No. What? Tang Zheng turned pale with fright, you actually lied to me again. Tang Zheng was so angry that his eyes widened. This Li Xiaotian really did not change his nature, he actually lied to him at this critical moment. Furthermore, this concerned Marshal's life. You. Tang Zheng's eyes were sharp and his hands were fast, he fiercely grabbed onto Li Xiaotian's collar, you want to kill you. Li Xiaotian squeezed out a smile and said jokingly, I saved you, but you want to kill me. Is this how you repay me for saving your life? You are harming Wu's life. If I don't kill you, do I have to thank you? Tang Zheng was furious. He blamed himself for being too naive to actually believe her nonsense. Li Xiaotian was not afraid and continued, do you think that if you hand yourself over to the imperial advisor, he will really give Wu the antidote? You're too naive. What kind of person is the state preceptor? How could he just watch her leave? Both of you are already on his death list. He's just trying to trick you into submission. Tang Zheng was slightly startled. He had also thought of this at that time, but for that slim chance of survival, he had to take this risk. He had no other choice. Looks like you know this as well. You're just deceiving yourself. If I hadn't deceived you, would you have obediently turned around and fled? For her, you will definitely continue to hand yourself over to the state preceptor without hesitation. At that time, both of you will be finished, and the state preceptor will be the final winner. Do you really want to see this scene? Li Xiaotian continued to chatter. Tang Zheng was speechless. If you want to kill me, then kill me. In any case, I'm not your match. However, in the future, others will say that you, Tang Zheng, are ungrateful and actually want to kill your own savior. Li Xiaotian pretended to be carefree and said. Tang Zheng's expression kept changing as he glared fiercely at Li Xiaotian. His gaze was as if he wanted to cut her into 1,000 pieces. Li Xiaotian, however, was not afraid at all. He raised his head and stared at him with a burning gaze. Tang Zheng was in a mess. He really didn't know what to do. Without the antidote, wouldn't Wu's life be in danger? If he went out and surrendered now, would he be able to exchange for the antidote? He immediately rejected this absurd idea. Forget about what the state preceptor was thinking at the beginning. With the state preceptor's personality, how could he give him the antidote? Therefore, this had already become a dead end. Suddenly, a hand was placed on Tang Zheng's arm. Marshall looked at him affectionately, shook his head, and said, "Don't kill her. She did the right thing. You can't sacrifice yourself for me." Tang Zheng was about to refute when Marshall's finger pressed down on his lips and continued, "Don't say it, I understand. This is fate. I accept it." After saying that, he turned to stare at Li Xiaotian and said, "Although I hate you, I have to thank you this time. Thank you for helping me out just now, so that everything can still be salvaged and not slipping into an irreparable abyss." Li Xiaotian laughed. "Tang Zheng, it seems that women are more reasonable than you." Tang Zheng coldly snorted, and hatefully released his fingers. Li Xiaotian regained his freedom, tidied up his clothes, and said, "Let's not be in a hurry to blame who is right and who is wrong. Leaving this place first is the most important thing." Tang Zheng turned a deaf ear and asked Marshall gently, "Can you hold on?" "I'm fine," Marshall said quickly. Tang Zheng frowned and grabbed Marshall's hand. What kind of person was Marshall? She was a pre-celestial martial artist, so the running just now definitely wouldn't cause her breathing to become so chaotic. There must be a problem. "I'm fine." Marshall wanted to break free from Tang Zheng's hand, but his hand was like a vice. How could she break free? She was very clear about the situation with her body. In fact, she had already felt that something was wrong. There was a faint pain in her chest, and she was unable to breathe. This kind of situation had never happened before, so it was obvious that the heart-devouring pill had begun to take effect. The Imperial Advisor said that after the heart-devouring pill took effect, it would devour her heart, causing her to bleed to death from all 7 orifices. She was not afraid of death, but she did not want to drag Tang Zheng down, nor did she want him to see her miserable death. She hoped that the image she left in Tang Zheng's eyes was beautiful. "Don't move, let me check." Tang Zheng channeled his innate qi, and threads of innate qi flowed along her meridians towards her body. When the innate qi reached her chest, Tang Zheng couldn't help but feel a bit of heartache, because he could clearly see the scar on her chest, which was caused by the Fire King of the Dragon Group in the Northwest Desert. Not only her chest, but her hands were also injured by the flames, leaving behind scars. Tian Chanzi had once said that this kind of scar could be removed bit by bit with innate qi, but it was not a short period of time. After Marshall obtained the fire underworld palm, he was engrossed in cultivation and did not come to Tang Zheng to remove the scar. Therefore, after delaying again and again, she still had this shocking scar on her body. Seeing the strange expression on Tang Zheng's face, Wu immediately guessed what she was thinking. He subconsciously looked at his chest, as if he could see the ugly scar through his clothes. He couldn't help but feel embarrassed. As the innate qi flowed, it immediately made a new discovery. Tang Zheng's heart couldn't help but tighten, as if it was being ruthlessly grabbed by someone. How could this be? Outside her heart, there was a black thing wriggling, as if it had a life of its own. It extended its tentacles and attached itself to her heart. Every time her heart beat, dark red blood would flow along those tentacles to that black thing. What the hell is this? Tang Zheng turned pale with fright, as this scene was too shocking for him. What's wrong? Seeing Tang Zheng's ashen face, Wu asked curiously. Tang Zheng shook his head and said, "Nothing, don't move." Tang Zheng could conclude that this thing was caused by the heart-devouring pill. The imperial advisor said that he could devour her heart, and it seemed that what he said was true. This damn thing was not just absorbing the blood from her heart bit by bit, it was not impossible for it to devour her heart in the future. That thing was alive, which made Tang Zheng think of a legendary spell, the Gu technique. The Gu technique was a very mysterious spell. Even in the original cultivation world, very few people knew this spell, and those who were proficient in it were even rarer. Just now, the heart-devouring pill must have contained a Gu worm. When Wu consumed it, the Gu worm was awakened and attached itself to her heart. If there was no antidote, the Gu worm would completely awaken and then slowly devour Wu's heart, completely killing her. In addition, if the Gu technique was cultivated to the extreme, one could use these Gu worms to control a person's consciousness and use them as puppets. The state preceptor's heart-devouring pill obviously doesn't have the ability to control the host, but it's not difficult to kill her. Damn, the imperial preceptor's mansion actually has such a weird thing. It seems that ninjutsu is not completely useless. In the past, the island nations stole a lot of good things from Huaxia. Tang Zheng thought indignantly. Even so, he did not intend to compromise. He was prepared to try and see if he could help her get rid of this damn thing. Hearing that, Wu's body slightly stiffened. He took a deep breath and held his breath as he looked deeply at Tang Zheng. He knew that he was going to heal her. Her true qi flowed to the outside of the cluster of Gu worms. Suddenly, the Gu worms shook as if they were stimulated. Those tentacles quickly grew and drilled into her heart. Ah! Wu's facial muscles immediately contorted as he screamed in pain. Beads of sweat dripped down from his forehead like rain. Tang Zheng was shocked and quickly asked, "Marshall, what's wrong with you?" I'm fine." Wu clenched his teeth and held on, but in an instant, he opened his mouth and let out a mournful scream. Tang Zheng saw those tentacles crazily drilling into Marshall's heart, and Tang Zheng's heart felt as if it had been ruthlessly stabbed by a knife. He already understood the power of this Gu worm, and although his true qi was powerful, it would definitely have a harmful effect on the Gu worm. It was precisely because the Gu worm had sensed danger that it would counterattack without any regard for its life. If Tang Zheng continued, perhaps the Gu worm would die, but Wu's heart would also be devoured by the Gu worm. In that case, everything would lose its meaning. Tang Zheng unwillingly withdrew his innate qi. As expected, those tentacles stopped moving and did not continue to drill into Wu's heart. However, they were still greedily sucking the blood from the heart. At this moment, those tentacles had already wrapped around half of the heart, and the speed at which they absorbed the blood became even faster. Wu stopped screaming and gasped for breath. His face turned from red to pale as he asked weakly, "How is it?" Tang Zheng's face was gloomy as he resolutely said, "I will definitely think of a way to cure your poison." Wu was dejected. Since he said so, then the situation was especially serious. She looked deeply at Tang Zheng, squeezed out a smile, and said, "It doesn't matter. Life and death are fated. I'm not afraid." Chapter 685. Li Xiaotian looked at the two of them clasped hands and Tang Zheng's resolute eyes. In a trance, she actually had an impulse to change to martial. However, the wolf quickly gained the upper hand. She said seriously, if you don't leave this place, you won't be able to cure her wholeheartedly. Therefore, leaving this place is the most important thing. Tang Zheng glanced at her from the corner of his eyes, supported martial, and walked forward. Li Xiaotian knew that his image in Tang Zheng's eyes had once again fallen, so he followed without saying a word. As far as the eye could see, there were many green bamboos that pierced the sky. The three of them had already walked for a period of time, but the bamboo forest seemed to have no end. Li Xiaotian said worriedly, the last time I encountered this situation, it was also very strange. Moreover, these bamboos are very strange. Even my arrows can't break them. Tang Zheng was shocked and asked, really? Li Xiaotian nodded his head heavily. Tang Zheng reached out and stroked the green bamboo. It was no different from ordinary bamboo, but why was it so stubborn? Even Li Xiaotian's arrow could not harm it in the slightest. How is it? Li Xiaotian asked. Tang Zheng did not say a word. His figure flashed and he began to wander around the bamboo forest. His fingers would occasionally tap on the green bamboo. Li Xiao 5, Tian and Marshall looked at him nervously, not knowing what the result would be. Suddenly, Tang Zheng stopped in his tracks. His brows were tightly knitted as he said, this is an array formation. Is there a way to get out? Li Xiaotian asked anxiously. You want to go out? Once you enter the sword forest, you will be a puppet in my hands, at my mercy. You still want to go out? You must be dreaming. An arrogant laughter suddenly came from the sky. If it was not the imperial advisor, who else could it be? The three of them were shocked. Tang Zheng immediately stood in front of Marshall to protect him. Li Xiaotian glanced at him and could not help but turn pale. The three of them looked up at the sky at the same time. Other than the bamboo forest, there was not a single ghost in sight. You don't have to look for me. If I don't show myself, you won't be able to find me. The state preceptor obviously knew their actions like the back of his hand. He said proudly, how was the taste of the poison? Tang Zheng, this is all your fault. You killed her, Nonsense. Marshall retorted loudly, all of this is your scheme. You still have the strength to refute me. You do have some perseverance. But soon, you will run out of strength. You can only lie on the ground and beg for mercy. In the end, you will bleed from your 7 orifices and die. That feeling, I am afraid I will not forget even if I become a ghost. Marshall's expression changed slightly as she faintly felt the pain in her heart increase. The goo worm was causing more and more damage to her. Shut up. Seeing Marshall's reaction, Tang Zheng flew into a rage and roared, the war soul in his hand fiercely slashed forward. Whoosh! The sword light swept across the green bamboo in front of him, causing it to immediately bend down and lie on the ground. However, it quickly bounced back and stood proudly. Seeing this scene with their own eyes, whether it was Tang Zheng or Marshall, they were all in disbelief. How could these green bamboos be so strange? That sword strike just now was enough to split open stones, so why was it unable to harm these seemingly weak bamboos? Feel free to vent your anger. Let's see if you can hurt my sword forest. The state preceptor laughed sinisterly. I don't believe in this evil. Tang Zheng went crazy, the war soul in his hand danced like a tiger, the sword light covered the sky and covered the earth, like an inescapable net, everywhere, slashing onto the green bamboo. In that instant, the bamboo leaves fluttered and the green bamboo bent. This small world was filled with berserk air currents, but when Tang Zheng stopped, the green bamboo all bounced back, not a single one breaking. Tang Zheng gasped for breath as he looked around in disbelief. This was completely beyond his imagination. What kind of ghost sword forest is this? Tang Zheng roared hysterically. The state preceptor's complacent laughter came from the sky, as if he was mocking Tang Zheng. Marshall's face became paler and paler, her eyes revealing a pained expression. Seeing Tang Zheng like this, her heart really ached. Li Xiaotian said calmly, "The sword forest is an important place in the state preceptor's residence for people to comprehend sword techniques. Ordinary disciples do not have the qualifications to enter, only those who have cultivated to a certain level have the qualifications. Yesterday, Junko came out of the sword forest, and then her strength increased greatly. I suspect that she comprehended a new sword technique in the sword forest." Comprehending sword techniques. Tang Zheng was startled. He looked around. What did these green bamboos have to do with sword techniques? "I don't cultivate sword techniques, so I'm not very clear about the way of the sword, so I can't tell if this news is true or false," Li Xiaotian said regretfully. Tang Zheng, on the other hand, calmed down. Didn't he train in sword techniques? Moreover, the Heaven-Flying Immortal's sword technique was a very powerful set of sword techniques. Since Junko could comprehend sword techniques in the sword forest, why couldn't he? He calmed down the anger in his heart, and his heart calmed down bit by bit. He simply closed his eyes, circulated his innate qi, and released his senses. Suddenly, he felt a trace of strangeness. The green bamboos disappeared and were replaced by streaks of sword qi. The sword qi pierced the sky and stood proudly. An indescribable mysterious aura lingered in the sword forest. He seemed to have realized that the green bamboos were all illusions. Their true colors were streaks of sword qi. No wonder weapons were unable to harm them in the slightest, because they did not have a physical body. The green bamboos were just illusions. Who exactly thought of this method to actually condense so much sword qi? Comprehending sword techniques in this kind of environment is indeed twice the result with half the effort. Every blade of grass and tree here was compatible with the way of the sword. As long as one used their heart to sense it, coupled with a certain amount of talent and cultivation as a foundation, it would not be difficult to comprehend sword techniques. When he quietly sensed the sword qi, the innate qi in his body involuntarily sped up. The Heaven-Flying Immortal's sword technique also began to circulate on its own. He subconsciously raised the War Soul sword. Swish! Sword light flashed, and the War Soul sword drew a beautiful sword light in the air. Wind rising, clouds surging. Although Tang Zheng still had his eyes closed, he still recognized this sword move. The innate qi quickly circulated according to the path of the Heaven-Flying Immortal's sword technique. This sword move was naturally used, completely out of his control. It was as if something had triggered the Heaven-Flying Immortal's sword technique. His heart suddenly became clear. It must be because of this sword forest. Other people could comprehend sword techniques here, but the Heaven-Flying Immortal's sword technique was too high level. He did not need to spend too much effort to comprehend it. The sword forest naturally triggered this point. Immediately, he swept away the dejection and bad luck from before and became spirited. He quietly felt the changes in his body. The Heaven-Flying Immortals had a total of 6 moves, and each move had 36 moves. It was incomparably complicated and varied. Previously, he had only cultivated to the 5th move, Return to Origin. He had not even touched the threshold of the 6th move. The 6th move was the peak of this sword technique. Of course, it was not easy to cultivate. The innate qi was still circulating rapidly in his meridians, and the War Soul sword in his hand still did not stop. Sword breaking 10,000 caddies. The 2nd move of the Heaven-Flying Immortals. Next. 3rd move, Lightning Fire Sword. 4th move, Heaven Falls and Earth Rends. 5th move, Return to Origin. The innate qi still did not stop. Tang Zheng felt like he was a balloon. The innate qi had already filled his entire body, and was about to explode. The War Soul sword was completed in one go, and these 5 moves were unleashed in an instant. Puff puff puff. The green bamboo was slashed by the sword again and again, and then it quickly returned to its original appearance. Tang Zheng seemed to be still doing useless work. Wu and Li Xiaotian looked at him worriedly, but seeing that he was immersed in it, they did not say anything to disturb him. Only, the two of them clenched their hands tightly, their palms drenched in cold sweat. The Imperial advisor's laughter was still deafening, continuously ridiculing Tang Zheng for overestimating himself and only knowing how to do such useless work. The War Soul sword danced faster and faster, the sword light intertwining, becoming denser and denser. The Imperial advisor's smile gradually weakened, and in the end, it disappeared without a trace. What replaced it was a cry of alarm. "What are you doing?" Of course, Tang Zheng would not answer him. He just kept on waving the War Soul sword, causing the true qi in his meridians to circulate even faster. Traces of enlightenment appeared in his mind. A gust of wind suddenly blew in the sword forest. This gust of wind rose from the soles of Tang Zheng's feet and soared upwards, causing the bamboo leaves to flutter and the green bamboos to sway with the wind. "Stop!" The Imperial advisor roared, and a figure suddenly appeared not far away, rushing over with lightning speed. Seeing that, Wu and Li Xiaotian rushed forward at the same time. The sun-shooting arrow pierced through the air and shot straight towards the Imperial advisor. Wu's palms turned fiery red, and the fire underworld palm once again displayed its might. The sword light flashed, and the broken sword in the Imperial advisor's hand exploded with a resplendent light. The sun-shooting arrow flew back, and after the fire underworld god's palm struck the broken sword, the huge recoil caused her to quickly retreat. The two of them worked together but were unable to stop the Imperial advisor. However, they were very clear that since the Imperial advisor was so nervous, it must be because Tang Zheng had gained something. They had to stop the Imperial advisor from getting close to Tang Zheng even if they had to risk their lives. Thus, the two of them charged forward once again. "Since you're courting death, I'll fulfill your wish," the Imperial advisor roared. Ding Dang shouted, and a sword light slashed into the void at the tail of the sun-shooting arrow. The thin thread that was hard to see with the naked eye was cut off, and the sun-shooting arrow's attack decreased sharply. After being blocked by the broken sword, it flew out diagonally. Li Xiaotian leaped into the air, wanting to catch the sun-shooting arrow. This was her treasure, the divine weapon that she had obtained from Tang Zheng with great difficulty. She could not lose it just like that. The Imperial advisor saw through her thoughts. With a flash of sword light, the broken sword blocked her path, and even the iron bow in her hand was cut into two. Li Xiaotian immediately retreated, barely dodging the attack. Looking at the iron bow in her hand that was broken into two pieces, she could not help but reveal a look of regret. Although this iron bow could not compare to the heaven-shocking bow, it was still a rare weapon. "You ate the heart-devouring pill and you're still so brave. Humph, this is truly unexpected. However, without my antidote, you won't be able to hold on for long. I won't kill you, I'll torture you to death." The Imperial advisor stared at Wu and laughed sinisterly. Whoosh whoosh. The Inferno Nether Divine Palm was like a tiger as it attacked the Imperial Preceptor. However, the Imperial Preceptor did not meet force with force. Instead, he dodged to the side and sneered, "You are digging your own grave. The more you circulate, the faster the poison will take effect. I don't need to do anything, you won't be able to last long." Chapter 686. Marshall fell to the ground, her entire body twitching in pain. Her face was devoid of blood, her pupils dilated, gradually losing their color. Her consciousness was gradually blurring, the scene in front of her quickly spinning. She felt as if her heart was about to stop beating. No, her heart was about to disappear. A heart-wrenching pain. She finally knew what it was like. The Imperial tutor smiled in satisfaction and said, "Now you know how powerful it is." He walked past her in large strides and headed straight for Tang Zheng. Li Xiaotian clenched her teeth and secretly said, "Go all out." Her figure flashed and blocked in front of the Imperial tutor. However, she was not in a hurry to make a move because she knew that she was not the Imperial tutor's opponent. If she made a move, it would mean that she would lose. Her goal was to delay the Imperial tutor and buy time for Tang Zheng. The Imperial tutor looked at Li Xiaotian with a murderous look and said, "You did not hesitate to sacrifice your life for him, is it really worth it?" You are the holy maiden of Li Palace. Li Xiaotian lightly said, whether it is worth it or not, I am the clearest about it. Heh, since you are so muddle-headed, then there is no need for me to persuade you. Li Palace's palace master knows that I killed you, so he can't do anything to me. Moreover, with Tang Zhang's technique, a mere Li Palace can be turned into ashes in the blink of an eye. The imperial tutor arrogantly said. Don't boast too early, be careful not to sprain your tongue. The imperial tutor smiled and did not comment. He raised his leg and walked towards Li Xiaotian. Wait a minute. Li Xiaotian immediately reached out her hand to stop him. The imperial tutor subconsciously stopped and said, What, you still have your last words? Li Xiaotian rolled her eyes and said, Yes. Too late. The imperial tutor did not give her the chance and directly chopped at her with the broken sword. Puff. Li Xiaotian's clothes were cut open and blood splattered out. She was injured. With just one sword, without the shooting sun arrow, she could not block one of the imperial tutor's attacks. The imperial preceptor arrogantly chased after him and said, You are too weak. There is no challenge or sense of accomplishment in killing you. Li Xiaotian's eyes flashed with despair. This was the result of trying to be brave. If he didn't pretend to be a good person, he wouldn't have fallen to such a state. From the corner of her eyes, she glanced at Tang Zhang and discovered that his eyes were still tightly shut. The war soul sword in his hand was like a tiger giving birth to wind, as fast as lightning, causing the wind in the sword forest to become even stronger. Tang Zhang, I hope I've bought enough time for you. She thought in despair. She unwillingly raised her head to block, but the imperial preceptor's broken sword was like the scythe of the Grim Reaper. She could not block it at all. As long as the broken sword fell again, her life would come to an end. Whoosh! A strand of hair on her forehead was sliced into two by the sword chi. She could even feel a burning pain on her cheeks. Creak creak. Suddenly, a cry sounded in her ears. Then, a ball of fire brushed past her body and soared into the air, spraying towards the imperial preceptor. The heat wave hit him in the face. The imperial preceptor had no choice but to take half a step back. Li Xiaotian also hurriedly retreated, escaping from the gates of hell. Turning her head, she found that Xiao Bai was standing by her feet. He raised his little head and pouted his little mouth as he spat out fire. Li Xiaotian was overjoyed. She couldn't wait to hug Xiao Bai and kiss him. She had seen Xiao Bai's power, so she hurriedly urged, Xiao Bai, burn him to death. The imperial preceptor was burned by the fire and appeared to be in a sorry state. He angrily roared, Little bastard, you escaped a calamity before. This time, without Tang Zhang, I want to see what kind of waves you can stir up. Xiao Bai screamed again and did not retreat an inch. Die! The imperial preceptor shouted as the broken sword in his hand slashed down. Boom! Flames soared into the air and completely enveloped the broken sword. However, the broken sword immediately burst out a bright sword light, suppressing the flames and pressing forward. The flames retreated bit by bit. Xiao Bai's claws dug deep into the soil, resisting the impact of the broken sword with difficulty. Gradually, the look in his eyes became dim. Previously, in the battle with the water sword, he had consumed a lot of energy and had not recovered yet. But in order to protect Tang Zhang, he resolutely stood out. But now, he was exhausted and had reached the end. He turned his head and glanced at Tang Zhang as if to say his final farewell. Then, he clenched his teeth and let out a sharp cry. The flames suddenly exploded. The broken sword swung back. The imperial preceptor's arms suddenly shook and the broken sword almost flew out of his hand. He was shocked. This little guy's strength really made him look at him with new eyes. But after all, he was an expert who had experienced hundreds of battles. He understood that at this critical moment, he could not drop the ball. Thus, he endured the rebounding force from the broken sword and swung it down again. Whoosh! The air was quickly split into two halves. The sword chi fell on Xiao Bai's head. In the next second, it seemed to be split into two. Li Xiaotian saw this, but there was nothing he could do. He unwillingly shouted no, but it was useless. Clang! With a muffled sound, the broken sword bounced up and flew out of the Imperial Preceptor's hand. The Imperial Preceptor was stunned and exclaimed, "How could this be?" Looking carefully, he saw a huge turtle shell in front of Xiao Bai, completely covering Xiao Bai. There was a white mark on the turtle shell. Apparently, it was left by the broken sword. Although there was a white mark, the turtle shell was still intact. A small head drilled out of the turtle shell and kept blinking at Xiao Bai. Xiao Bai's big eyes were also filled with joy. He stretched out his small paw and touched Gue Qiansui's head. Although Gue Qiansui's attack power was not strong, because of its nature, its defensive ability was particularly strong. This had been proved just now. It had been hiding in Tang Zheng's backpack. Because its fighting power was not strong, it had not participated in the battle. At this moment, Tang Zheng was in danger. Gue Qiansui finally fought back. What is this? The Imperial Preceptor looked at the trembling broken sword in the mud and then looked at Gue Qiansui and exclaimed. I, Gue Qiansui, will absolutely not allow you to hurt the exalted immortal. Gue Qiansui spoke in human language and said firmly. You are a demon beast, but you actually cultivated to the level where you can speak human language. The State Preceptor was startled as if he saw a ghost. Exalted immortal, who is the exalted immortal? His eyes turned and stared at Tang Zheng. He said incredulously, you actually called him an immortal. What qualifications does he have? Immortal's magical power is not something you can guess. Gue Qiansui said disdainfully. The Imperial Preceptor restrained his expression and said, I don't care what immortal he is. Even if he is a real immortal, I will not let him return to my sword forest. His figure flashed and he picked up his broken sword. Like a gust of wind, he swept over Gue Qiansui's head. Gue Qiansui could only sigh. It was too late to stop him. Wush Tang Zheng was surrounded by a gust of wind. His eyes were still closed. In his mind, the situation of the sword forest was completely presented. He saw Wu and Li Xiaotian risking their lives to protect him. He saw Wu fall to the ground. He saw Xiao Bai and Gue Qiansui's decisive action. But he could not help them. Because he had reached the most critical moment. That trace of understanding was getting clearer and clearer. He felt that he was inextricably linked with the sword qi in the sword forest. The wind between heaven and earth was like a link between him and the sword qi, transmitting each other's information. The battle soul in his hand gradually slowed down. But he still repeated the 5 moves of flying immortals from outer sky over and over again. It was a hair-raising process. Master, the sword qi has a spirit. If you can communicate with it, the sword qi can be collected in your hand. A voice suddenly sounded in Tang Zheng's mind. He immediately remembered that it was the voice of the sword spirit. At that time, he obtained the sword spirit and the wisp of remnant soul in the snow mountain in the northeast. Moreover, with the original battle soul and the battle soul, the 3 combined and fused into a new sword spirit. However, the sword spirit had always been silent, and other than discovering that it had allowed the war soul sword to level up to a heaven-level magic treasure, it did not display any other mystical abilities, so he temporarily threw it to the back of his mind. Unexpectedly, at this moment, the sword spirit took the initiative to speak. You're saying that the sword qi has a spirit. As long as I can communicate with it, I can collect all the sword qi for my own use? Tang Zheng asked in surprise. With so many sword qi, if he could collect them all, then Tang Zheng's cultivation would definitely advance by leaps and bounds. It was completely a blessing in disguise. Yes. The sword spirit replied, I can help master. How can you help me? The sword spirit has a spirit. The sword qi also has a spirit. The 2 are connected and can be fused into one. The sword spirit said solemnly. Then hurry up and act. Tang Zheng had already seen the imperial tutor pass Gui Qiansui and Xiao Bai and fly above his head. He was condescending and slashed down with his sword. He was bound to heavily injure him. He had no time to resist. He could only place his hopes on the sword spirit. The sword spirit received the order. The battle soul's sword light shone brightly like a bright sun. A buzzing sword sound rang out as if it was speaking. Then, a strange scene appeared. Buzzing sounds immediately rose and fell from all directions. It was like an echo in response to the battle soul's sword cry. These sounds seemed to be communicating with each other. It was ringing non-stop. The imperial tutor who was in mid-air had a huge change in expression. Although he did not understand what the buzzing sound meant, he had already sensed that the aura in the sword forest had undergone an earth-shattering change. It was a change that made him afraid. A strong wind blew and the green bamboo swayed non-stop. The sound of shattering rose and fell one after another. The imperial tutor had no choice but to stop his attack. He landed on the ground and looked around. Looking at the chaotic sword forest, he shouted, "What's going on?" There was a mysterious connection between him and the sword forest. This was a special connection that all the imperial tutors of the past would cultivate. Therefore, the imperial tutor could control everything in the sword forest as he wished. But at this moment, he realized that this connection was rapidly weakening. This was unprecedented and unheard of. All the imperial tutors had never encountered such a thing. Gradually, his eyes revealed fear for the first time. It was a fear that came from the bottom of his heart. Chapter 687. The crackling sound became louder and louder, continuous. As far as the eye could see, the swaying bamboo exploded one after another with a loud bang, turning into pieces that drifted away with the wind. The imperial preceptor's impression of this scene was too deep. Every time he successfully comprehended a sword technique, there would be a corresponding bamboo that would explode. If he was lucky enough, there would be a treasure sword hidden in the bamboo. From then on, the treasure sword would belong to the person who comprehended the sword technique. Every time the sword technique was comprehended to a higher level, there would be more bamboo that would explode. That year, after the imperial preceptor had succeeded in comprehending the sword technique, 18 bamboo had exploded at the same time. It was a spectacular sight. After Junko had comprehended the sword technique, only one bamboo had exploded. This meant that her sword technique was still worlds apart from the imperial preceptor's. At this moment, the imperial preceptor looked at the exploding bamboo, which had already exceeded 18. Could it be that Tang Zheng's sword technique was so powerful that it was even more than the number of bamboo that he had exploded back then? Then what kind of sword technique would this be? Immediately, he was anxious and angry in his heart. Without any grace, he roared, "Stop, quickly stop." How could Tang Zheng care about him? His emotions fluctuated as he could clearly feel that the exploded bamboo had turned into strands of sword chi. The sword chi crazily poured into the war soul sword and then transmitted into his 8 extraordinary meridians. In an instant, he was like a huge pool that was flooded with a large amount of water. These sword chi quickly transformed into true chi and stored in his body. The true chi rapidly soared. At the same time, most of the sword chi was absorbed by the war soul sword. The light on the war soul sword became more and more intense, and the dark appearance of the war soul sword began to change bit by bit. The veins on the imperial preceptor's forehead bulged as he roared, "Tang Zheng, I will kill you." His hands quickly formed a seal, and a hand seal rose into the air and circled above his head. Previously, when he used the sword technique, he did not need to form a seal at all. This was because his cultivation had already reached a certain level, and ordinary sword techniques could be used with just a thought. But this time, he actually formed a seal, which meant that this move was definitely not simple. The handprint quickly circled above his head. He gripped the broken sword with both hands and slashed forward while roaring, "1,000 killing slash." The broken sword flew out of his hand, and the handprint above his head also flew out like a meteor and merged with the broken sword. In an instant, the broken sword underwent an earth-shattering change. The broken part of the sword actually grew out again, forming a complete sword. Li Xiaotian was dumbstruck by the rebirth of the broken sword. However, Tang Zheng remained unmoved like a boulder as he shouted, "Explode! Pa! Pa!" All the bamboos in the forest exploded, turning into strands of sword energy. Beams of light also rose from some of the bamboos. Clearly, there were swords hidden in these bamboos. It was as if Junko had obtained them. These swords shone brightly, but they were like meteors that streaked across the sky, exploding with a loud bang, turning into specks of light. Along with the overflowing sword chi, they all rushed into the War Soul Sword. A portion of them was absorbed by Tang Zheng's body and transformed into true chi. The Imperial Advisor's 1,000-killing slash had already arrived in front of Tang Zheng. The powerful sword chi cut open wounds on his body, and in the next moment, it seemed like it was going to reap his life. Break! Just at this moment, Tang Zheng's tightly shut eyes suddenly opened, as if they were glowing. He opened his mouth and roared, "Heaven Flying Immortal!" Tang Zheng had finally mastered the 6th move of the Heaven Flying Immortal Sword technique. Swish! The War Soul Sword flew out from his hand and turned into a bolt of lightning, striking the broken sword. Crack! With a crisp sound, the newly grown part of the broken sword broke with a loud bang. Puff! The Imperial Advisor spat out a mouthful of blood and knelt on the ground with one knee, looking at the scene in front of him in shock. How could this be? The 1,000-killing slash is still not his match. How is this possible? He muttered to himself, as if he had been possessed. But in the next second, his pupils widened even more, because the War Soul Sword did not stop. Instead, it flew towards him like a hot knife through butter. He flipped backwards in the air and dodged the attack. The War Soul Sword brushed past his scalp as it flew past. Before he could even catch his breath, the War Soul Sword changed its direction in mid-air and stabbed towards his back. At such a long distance, Tang Zheng was actually able to change his direction through the air. He suddenly realized something and exclaimed, "Imperial Sword Technique. You actually learned the Imperial Sword Technique." This was the technique that the Imperial Advisor yearned for even in his dreams, but the ninjutsu did not include the Imperial Sword Technique. He had only heard of it from his seniors, and once he cultivated the Imperial Sword Technique, he would be like a god, taking a person's head from 1,000 miles away. He never thought that Tang Zheng would actually know such a technique at such a young age. Tang Zheng had long since cultivated the Imperial Sword Technique, but the Imperial Sword Technique consumed a lot of the caster's innate chi, unless he really found a flying sword. Flying swords were different from ordinary magic treasures. Only with special materials could they be forged into flying swords. Although the War Soul Sword was already a heaven-level magic treasure, it was still not a flying sword, which was why Tang Zheng did not often use the Imperial Sword Technique. But now that he had finally comprehended the 6th move of the Flying Immortals from Heaven, everything had changed. Flying Immortals from Heaven, as the name suggested, were like immortals flying from the heavens. This immortal was the sword, and the sword in his hand turned into an immortal. It was like an arm, and wherever he pointed, it would be there. It was perfectly compatible with the essence of the Imperial Sword Technique, merging the two into one. Tang Zheng was able to control the sword so smoothly through the air. The Imperial Advisor was extremely regretful. He did not investigate clearly, causing his efforts to be in vain and his losses to be huge. Seeing the War Soul Sword carrying a berserk aura attack him once again, the Imperial Advisor was unarmed and did not fight back. With a thought, he disappeared without a trace. Boom! The War Soul Sword slashed onto the ground, causing mud to fly up. Escape technique. Tang Zheng was awe-inspiring. The Imperial Advisor had an escape technique, so even if he had comprehended the 6th move of the Flying Immortals from Heaven, it would still be useless. He definitely won't be willing to escape like this. He must be hiding somewhere, waiting for an opportunity. With regards to the Imperial Advisor's sinister methods, Tang Zheng still remembered them clearly. He immediately came in front of Wu Mian, afraid that the Imperial Advisor would take her hostage again. Marshall was in a daze, his entire body twitching, his eyes rolled back, as if he could lose his life at any moment. What should we do? He was already certain that his innate chi would only stimulate the goo, allowing it to take Marshall's life even faster, so he did not dare to act rashly. Marshall, I will always be by your side. You must persevere. I will definitely find a way to save you. Tang Jing whispered into Marshall's ear, not knowing if she could hear him. Li Xiaotian did not have the mood to care about Marshall's life and death. She was looking around in surprise and shouted, "The sword forest has disappeared." The sword forest had indeed disappeared. The originally lush green bamboo had disappeared without a trace, leaving behind only a vast and empty wasteland. The village not far away also entered her eyes, but the dense white fog in the distance caused her heart to instantly fall to the bottom. Although they had escaped the shackles of the sword forest, they were still trapped in the imperial advisor's mansion. The thick fog outside was still an insurmountable barrier. Let's leave this place quickly, Li Xiaotian urged. Tang Jing swept his eyebrows, causing Li Xiaotian's heart to tighten. He had the urge to retreat and exclaimed, "Your cultivation." Tang Jing coldly snorted, but did not reply. Just now, when the sword chi entered his body, it caused his innate chi to soar, breaking through to the 9th level of Anidia in one fell swoop. From the 7th level of Anidia to the 9th level of Anidia, 2 levels of cultivation had broken through like a hot knife through butter. This was only a portion of the sword chi. The majority of the sword chi had been absorbed by the war soul sword spirit. One could imagine how powerful the sword chi contained within the sword forest was. It was simply a treasure trove. No wonder the imperial advisor's mansion regarded it as an important place. It was a pity that the imperial advisor did not know how powerful the heaven-flying immortal sword technique that Tang Jing cultivated was, nor did he know that the war soul sword contained a sword spirit. Therefore, Tang Jing was able to take advantage of such a great opportunity and absorb all the sword chi in the sword forest. Without the nourishment of the sword chi, the treasured swords that were originally buried in the soil also disappeared, turning into strands of sword chi that merged into the war soul sword. At this moment, the war soul sword had already undergone quite a few changes. The originally dark sword body had mottled bright spots, like a dusty pearl that had finally revealed the tip of an iceberg. Li Xiaotian recalled the frightening situation just now, especially the last few sword strikes of Tang Jing, forcing the imperial advisor to flee in a sorry state. She couldn't help but feel intoxicated. At the same time, she also felt a deep sense of powerlessness. The gap between her and Tang Jing was growing larger and larger. It was as if there was a chasm that was difficult to cross. She could not guess what level Tang Jing's cultivation had reached. Seeing how meticulous he was with Wu, she could not help but think that it would be great if he was in Wu's position. Tang Jing carried Wu Tsang by the waist and said solemnly, "Let's go." Together, they walked out of the sword forest. The messy sword forest was especially eye-catching in this quiet village. When they walked out of the sword forest, a black mass of people surrounded them from all directions. Where did these people come from? Li Xiaotian sighed and explained, "There are a lot of people in the imperial advisor's mansion, so they must have received the orders of the imperial advisor to hide and not come out. Now that you have destroyed their sword forest, of course they will rush out and fight you to the death." Fight to the death? I think it's more like courting death. Tang Jing was not afraid at all. His cultivation had increased by 2 levels. In addition, after comprehending the heaven-flying immortal's sword technique, his confidence had increased greatly. The war soul sword in his hand let out a buzzing sword cry, trembling non-stop, as if it had the urge to drink blood. Li Xiaotian was not optimistic and said, "And swallow an elephant, the strength of an individual is limited, although their strength is not as good as yours, but they can't withstand the number of people, the human wave tactic will also drag you to death." Tang Jing could not help but remember the situation in the imperial palace, and said disdainfully, "Island nation all like human wave tactics? Since that's the case, then let's fight. You hold her, if she suffers any more injuries, I will hold you accountable." As he spoke, he handed Wu over to Li Xiaotian. Li Xiaotian looked at Wu, who was in his embrace at a loss, thinking, "Why is this my responsibility again?" Chapter 688. Walala. War Spirit's blade left a long trail on the ground as sparks flew everywhere. Tang Zheng took large strides and rushed out of the crowd to kill. At the front of the crowd, a familiar figure jumped into his eyes, Junko. She had actually appeared again. Moreover, she was obviously the core of this group of people. Her expression was ashen, and she was like a female leopard that had gone berserk. She roared sternly, "These people destroyed our sword forest. Kill. Use their blood as a sacrifice to the sword forest. Kill." Deafening battle cries rang out from the crowd. Tang Zheng's eyebrows rose high as War Spirit's blade glowed with light. Especially those mottled spots, they were like bright stars in the sky, shining brightly and emitting sword chi that made people's heart palpitate. But the Imperial Tutor's people's eyes were red as they charged forward without caring about anything else. Puff puff puff, War Spirit's blade was raised high, bringing with it a stream of scarlet blood. Some people screamed as they fell to the ground. Like an infectious disease, more and more people fell to the ground. Wherever Tang Zheng passed, no one could stand. At this moment, he was at his peak state. Fasting grade 9, complete heaven sword and flying immortal sword technique, it was simply a match made in heaven. When they worked together, the explosive killing power made people's jaws drop. Junko was pushed to the back of the crowd. The hatred in her eyes was gradually replaced by shock. How did he become so powerful? Junko could not find the answer. She could only see her sect members fall one by one. Suddenly, as if she had gone crazy, she screamed hysterically, "Retreat, retreat!" The crowd retreated like a tide. How could Tang Zheng let go of this opportunity to chase after them? War Spirit's blade flashed as he charged towards these people. "Seal!" Junko shouted in Island Nation's language. Immediately, everyone gave up resisting and formed seals with both hands. In an instant, a mysterious aura filled the air. Tang Zheng's expression turned cold as he looked up at the sky. He saw that the enemies were all raising their hands in the air. Then, a little light gathered above their heads. Finally, a sword was formed. They actually used ninjutsu and hand seals to condense a sword. The light of this sword was not bright, but there was no doubt that the lethality it contained was not to be underestimated. "Kill!" Everyone shouted in unison. The ground shook, and the surrounding houses collapsed. The stream splashed several meters high, and even the soil on the ground floated up. Tang Zheng stopped in his tracks, pointed his right hand forward, and shouted, "Heaven flying immortal!" Shwa! The War Soul sword flew into the air and turned into a sword light. At the same time, the virtual sword above everyone's head also shot out, welcoming the War Soul sword. Boom! A blinding ray of light rose from the point where the two swords collided, spreading in all directions. A powerful impact followed closely behind, raising the ground in all directions. Tang Zheng felt as if he had been hit by a huge force. He felt a sweetness in his throat and almost spat out a mouthful of blood. He forcibly suppressed the urge to spit out blood and looked up. It was a vast expanse of white. There was no other color in the world. On the other side, the sound of people falling to the ground also rose and fell. Obviously, not only did Tang Zheng not feel good, the people on the other side were probably even worse. After all, their cultivation was not comparable to Tang Zheng's, so their endurance was naturally much weaker. His eyes were no longer of any use. Tang Zheng could only release his perception, trying to figure out what was going on with the other party. Just as he circulated his true chi, a sense of danger surged in his heart. What's going on? He didn't have time to think. He rolled on the ground and leaped to the side. Boom! He could vaguely see that the place where he was standing had turned into a deep pit, and the Imperial advisor was standing beside the pit. His eyes were blood red, like a wild beast that wanted to devour a person. The Imperial advisor really didn't escape. Tang Zheng shivered, and with a wave of his hand, an even more resplendent sword light lit up in the white light, and the War Soul sword flew back into his hand from who knows where. Looking at it carefully, the mottled spots on the War Soul's sword were even bigger, covering almost half of the sword body. The original black spots were like spots of rust that could peel off at any time. The exposed spots were abnormally dazzling, shining brightly. Tang Zheng, you have a divine armament in your hand and a powerful sword technique. I was careless and actually fell into your trap. This is a great humiliation. I will kill you and wash away my previous shame. The Imperial Advisor said with a murderous aura. Obediently release Wu Junshan and the others, and I will naturally leave. Otherwise, I'm afraid your disciples will be buried with you. Tang Zheng said in a clear voice. You want to save them, right? Fine, follow me. I'll see if you have the ability. The Imperial Advisor rolled his eyes and laughed strangely. Tang Zheng's head jumped. The other party's smile was too strange. Could it be that he had some tricks up his sleeve? But even if there really was a trick, he could only rush in. Because Tang Zheng knew that although he had narrowly won the match, it was impossible for him to truly kill the Imperial Advisor. After all, the other party's cultivation was much higher than his. However, it was impossible for the Imperial Advisor to capture him alive. The two of them fell into a stalemate. The surrounding white light had already gradually dissipated, and their eyes finally regained their vision. With a single glance, everyone was dumbstruck. The paradise-like village had already disappeared, and in its place was ruins. It was a complete mess. On the ground, there were many disciples of the Imperial Advisor's manor, and those who could stand could be counted on one hand. Just now, they had fought against Tang Zheng with the strength of a group, but they did not gain the slightest advantage. Everyone looked at Tang Zheng in shock. They had never thought that such a young person would be able to cultivate to such a godly level. Li Xiaotian was hugging Wu at the side, in a daze. His eyes were lifeless, his brain had already shut down, and he had lost the ability to think. 1 against 100, the courage of 1,000 soldiers, nothing more than this. Everyone's eyes were once again focused on Tang Zheng and the Imperial Advisor. Hearing the conversation between the two, Li Xiaotian's heart could not help but tighten. He wanted to say something to dissuade them, but he swallowed his words back. At this moment, her words to Tang Zheng was simply a passing wind, and Tang Zheng would not pay attention to it. Imperial Advisor. Island nation people saw the Imperial Advisor and respectfully saluted. Even those who were lying on the ground struggled to get up. The Imperial Advisor looked at them indifferently and said, "Stand down." Everyone hesitated for a moment, but they did not dare to disobey his order. They supported the injured disciples and retreated to the side. Junko's face was full of shame. She lowered her head and retreated to the side. The Imperial Advisor looked at this group of defeated soldiers without a trace of pity. His eyes were as calm as an ancient well. Just now, he let these people rush forward. He knew that there would be many casualties, but the final result was still beyond his expectations. He originally hoped that with so many people working together, they could at least seriously injure Tang Zheng, but he did not expect that he would not even spit out a mouthful of blood. One must know that when he was hiding in the dark, he spat out a few mouthfuls of blood. This move, Heaven Flying Immortal, was deeply imprinted in the depths of his soul. Even if he died, he would not forget it. Especially when he saw this move for the second time, his soul had a kind of feeling of trembling. This sword was too powerful, the brilliant heavenly might was nothing more than this. Immediately, this made him even more determined to capture Tang Zheng alive. Only by pulling out all the things in his head could he make up for his loss. Otherwise, even if he killed Tang Zheng, his loss would not be recovered. The Imperial Advisor tidied up his bad mood, glanced at Tang Zheng, and rushed out like a whirlwind, and said, "If you want to save people, then follow me." His voice fell. He had already rushed out more than 100 meters, running straight into the depths of the village. Tang Zheng took Marshal from Li Xiaotian's hand, and chased after him without saying a word. Li Xiaotian hesitated for a moment, and followed closely behind. Immediately, the Imperial Advisor was in front, Tang Zheng and Li Xiaotian were behind, Xiaobai stood on his shoulder, and Gue Qiansui went back into his backpack. One in front, one behind, as fast as lightning. As Tang Zheng locked onto the Imperial Tutor's figure, he lowered his head to look at Marshall, who was in his embrace. Her face was already devoid of blood, and she had completely fallen into a coma, but the occasional throbbing between her brows still showed the pain he was enduring. He carefully controlled his true qi to enter Marshall's body, and soon, the scene around her heart clearly appeared in his mind. The black goo worm had completely awakened, and broke out of its shell. Like a squid, it had countless tentacles, firmly wrapped around Marshall's heart. The goo worm was no longer black, but had turned blood red, as if it had sucked the heart's blood. The heart's heartbeat had become very weak, as if it could stop at any time. As if sensing the threat of his true qi, the goo worm's tentacles suddenly contracted, tightly wrapping around the heart. Marshall immediately let out a cry of pain, and actually woke up, but the intense pain in her eyes made Tang Zheng feel as if a knife was being twisted. Where are we going? Marshall asked weakly. We are saving people. Marshall's eyes immediately showed a trace of joy, and said, You found them? Not yet, but I will definitely find them, I promise you. Tang Zheng said resolutely. Marshall's mouth twitched, and she squeezed out a smile. I believe you, you must save them. Before she finished speaking, her head tilted, and she fainted again. Marshall, Marshall. Tang Zheng shouted loudly, but there was no response. Li Xiaotian looked at him from the side, and wanted to say something, but hesitated, and finally clenched his teeth and said, Her poison is already very serious. The meaning behind his words seemed to be that he wanted Tang Zheng to give up. Tang Zheng suddenly raised her head and glared fiercely at Li Xiaotian. Her neck suddenly shrunk, as she felt the fear of a sword cutting across her neck. Until the last moment, I will never give up. This is what I promised her. Tang Zheng said word by word. The corner of Li Xiaotian's mouth twitched, and he said hesitantly, She's so lucky to have met you. While they were talking, the group had already left the village far behind them, crossed a mountain, and finally arrived in front of a huge lake. Chapter 689. The Imperial Advisor stopped in front of the lake and looked at the beautiful and quiet lake. A mysterious smile appeared on his face, and a deep sense of reverence appeared between his brows. Imperial Advisor, there is no path ahead. Where else do you want to lead us? Tang Zheng asked in a deep voice. The Imperial Advisor turned his head to look at him and said, Who said there's no path? He stepped on the waves and walked towards the center of the lake. With his cultivation, he could already cross the river on a reed. With a light tap of his foot on the surface of the lake, ripples appeared on the surface of the lake as he quickly walked towards the center of the lake. What is he going to do? Li Xiaotian asked. Tang Zheng shook his head. He could not guess what the other party was thinking. Take good care of Marshall. Tang Zheng handed Marshall over to Li Xiaotian. Even if there really is some scheme, I have no way out. Li Xiaotian hugged Marshall and looked straight at him. She wanted to say something but hesitated. Take care of yourself. Tang Zheng looked at her deeply, then looked at Marshall gently. With a leap, he jumped onto the surface of the lake. The soles of his shoes sank into the lake, but he did not completely fall into the water. However, compared to the Imperial Advisor's leisurely stroll, it was clearly much more difficult for him to walk. Seeing that he had also arrived at the center of the lake, the Imperial Advisor gave him a strange smile and shouted, Open. Crack. As if something had been touched, cracking sounds could be heard from the bottom of the lake. The surface of the lake began to fluctuate violently, and in an instant, a huge whirlpool appeared on the surface of the lake. The Imperial Advisor stood by the side of the whirlpool. No matter how powerful the whirlpool was, it was unable to shake him in the slightest. Tang Zheng felt the vibration coming from beneath his feet and was surprised. What was the other party trying to do? Before he could understand, the whirlpool grew bigger and bigger, and a black hole appeared in front of him. The lake water flowed down the edge of the black hole like a huge waterfall. The black hole was incomparably dark, without a single ray of light. It was impossible to see what was below, and a formless fear struck his heart. If you want to save him, then follow me. After the state preceptor finished speaking, he jumped into the black hole. Tang Jing stretched his neck and found that the Imperial Tutor's figure had been swallowed by the black hole. He turned his head to look at Li Xiaotian and Marshall, who were on the shore. Li Xiaotian looked at him with burning eyes, revealing a faint concern between his brows. He suddenly turned his head and touched Xiao Bai on his shoulder, saying, "Xiao Bai, let's go and see what's strange down there." Xiao Bai nodded heavily, his small eyes filled with a dignified expression. Whoosh! Tang Jing jumped into the black hole. He heard the sound of wind and the roaring sound of flowing water. As far as the eye could see, there was only darkness. It was like a bottomless pit. He didn't know when it would end, and he didn't know where it would lead. If an ordinary person had fallen into such a black hole, they would have screamed in fear and lost control of their bowels. But Tang Jing didn't. He was like a calm and wise man, trying to find out what was waiting for him in front. The darkness had completely submerged him, and the state preceptor's figure had long disappeared. A flame blossomed on Tang Jing's fingertips. In order to disperse the sticky darkness, he ignited the true fire. The purple true fire was exceptionally bright in the darkness, illuminating the surroundings and restoring his line of sight. The fear in his heart gradually subsided. He looked carefully, and his pupils couldn't help but shrink as he exclaimed, "This is a huge cave." He could clearly see the edge of the black hole, the flowing water on the bluestone slabs, covered in moss, and extended downwards to an unknown place. This cave is really deep. Tang Jing felt that he was about to fall to the earth's core. Why would there be such a strange cave in the state preceptor's mansion? Furthermore, it was built in the center of a lake and set up such a strange mechanism. Suddenly, land appeared below. Tang Jing was overjoyed, he had finally reached the end. He immediately circulated his innate qi, which continuously rotated under his feet, canceling out most of the impact. Pung! He landed steadily on the ground, but the impact still shattered the stone slabs under his feet. Where's the state preceptor? He had already raised his guard and looked around vigilantly, but there was no trace of the state preceptor. Since he led me here, he definitely won't hide and not show himself. This is definitely not a dead end, there is still a path ahead. Sure enough, he found a stone door behind the waterfall. The stone door was hidden in the darkness. If he didn't have the true fire in his hand to illuminate it, it would have been extremely difficult to find. After the water from the waterfall fell to the ground, it splashed and flowed along a huge ditch to an unknown place, not accumulating on the ground. Passing through the water curtain, Tang Jing entered the stone door. A cool breeze blew out from the stone door. There was air convection. This meant that it was not a dead end, so he carefully walked forward, guarding against any sudden attacks. He could already conclude that at this moment, the state preceptor did everything possible to lure him here. It was definitely not just to kill him, but to capture him and obtain his magic. Then the state preceptor would definitely not easily take his life. The state preceptor also understood that Tang Jing could end his life at any time, so he had to do it in one strike. A small trick would not work at all. Since that was the case, then he had to guard against the state preceptor's big move, a big move that could make him surrender. Ding dong. A crisp sound startled Tang Jing. He tripped over something hard. What the hell is this? He quickly used the true fire to illuminate the area. His breathing could not help but tighten, and he subconsciously took a step back. A skull. A terrifying skull was placed on the ground. There were still traces of blood on it, as if it had not completely dried up. This. Tang Jing felt a chill run from the bottom of his feet to the top of his head. Although he was not afraid of this, why would there be a skull here? And it looked relatively fresh, as if it had just died not long ago. Suddenly, he realized something, his eyes widened, and he exclaimed, could it be theirs? Wu Junshan and the others were imprisoned, could this be one of their heads? Once this thought drilled into his mind, it could not be dismissed, he could not help but fall into deep worry. What if it was Lan Yu's? What if it was Wu Junshan's? At this moment, he gradually understood that he did not know when, but he had actually become very concerned about their safety. It was the kind of concern that came from the bottom of his heart, unknowingly and imperceptibly formed. Did he not always have a good impression of the two? How did it become like this? He shook his head hard, but he could not figure it out. In the end, he attributed all of this to the blood relationship, where blood was thicker than water. Although he had always been avoiding this kind of blood relationship, the feelings in the depths of his heart had unknowingly changed. In fact, when he was very young, he looked forward to this kind of relationship very much. Seeing that other children had parents who doted on them while he only had a grandfather, he had also fantasized that his parents would come to his side and give him endless love. In the end, none of this came true, so he buried this extravagant hope in the bottom of his heart. Ever since Lan Yu and Wu Junshan appeared, although he firmly rejected them, unknowingly, the hope buried in the depths of his heart had begun to sprout again, and it had unknowingly grown. At this moment, when he realized that the two of them might really have left him, they were separated by life and death. He could not help but feel a sense of fear. No! Suddenly, he screamed and rushed out like a madman. The wind became colder as if it came from the underworld. Moreover, traces of the smell of blood were also blown by the cold wind, causing one's nerves to involuntarily tighten. Suddenly, the scene in front of him opened up. He had arrived in a huge rock cave, and many stalactites were hanging upside down above his head like sharp swords. Behind the stalactites was an underground river, and the water surged, creating white splashes. The river kept flowing forward, and it was unknown where it flowed. There were some scattered bones on the ground, and Tang Zheng's heart tightened. He could tell that they were human bones, and there were mottled bloodstains scattered around. This place was like hell on earth, causing people to tremble with fear. Hee, you're finally here. The imperial tutor's voice rang out again. He was standing on a high platform not far away, looking down at Tang Zheng from above. Imperial tutor, quickly hand over the person. Tang Zheng's eyes were red with anxiety, and he roared in anger. You want the person, right? As you wish. The imperial tutor said with a smile, his eyes flashing like a cunning fox. The imperial tutor raised his head, pointed above, and said, Don't you want the person? Isn't that it? Hearing this, Tang Zheng hurriedly raised his head to look. Where was the person? Seeing Tang Zheng's puzzled expression, the imperial tutor reminded him, Look carefully, aren't those stalactites people? Tang Zheng was suddenly startled, and looked over. Ah! Even though he was experienced and knowledgeable, he could not help but let out a cry of surprise. Sure enough, those were not stalactites. They were clearly people hanging upside down, but their bodies were covered by something like crystals, making them unable to move. What exactly is going on? Tang Zheng asked loudly. I always forgot to tell you something. Wu Junshan and the others were not captured by me. The imperial tutor said mysteriously. Tang Zheng's eyelids twitched. This was a problem he had always ignored. Since he could force the imperial tutor with his strength, then with his cultivation, it was impossible for him to take down Wu Junshan and Lan Yu in one fell swoop. One had to know that their strength had already reached the peak of perfection. It was easier said than done to capture them alive. Unless one's cultivation was several levels higher than theirs, it was impossible to succeed. But the fact was that they were captured, so there must be a secret that no one knew. Hearing the imperial tutor admitted himself, Tang Zheng hurriedly asked, Then who captured them? When the time comes, you will naturally know. The imperial tutor deliberately mystified. You have helpers? Tang Zheng asked, Aren't you the legendary #1 expert of the island nation? Other than you, who else can do this? Tang Zheng's heartbeat quickened. This was beyond his expectations. If the imperial tutor had helpers, then wouldn't he be walking right into a trap? Chapter 690. Tang Zheng did not pay attention to the state teacher's sarcasm. Instead, he raised his head and stared at the stalactites. He could vaguely see that the people inside had their eyes closed, indicating that they had already fainted. Who hung them up there? What was the thing that wrapped them up? What was the point of not killing them but hanging them up like specimens? Questions came one after another, and Tang Zheng could not figure them out at all. Look, you will also become one of them in a while. The state teacher said proudly. Do the bones on the ground belong to some of them? Tang Zheng pointed at the bones on the ground and asked with an ashen face. Of course, who else is here besides them? The state teacher did not hide anything and admitted it openly. You killed people, do you still want to humiliate them like this? You even deliberately peeled off the bones. You really are a group of animals, beasts. Tang Zheng was extremely angry. Tang Zheng had also killed enemies before, but after killing them, he would never humiliate the bones of the other party. However, the other party actually pulled out the tendons and skinned them, and even casually threw away these bones. This was already an extremely perverted behavior. Others said that the island nation people were perverted, but who would have thought that it was true? Even the state teacher, a dignified master of a generation, would do such a beastly act. +2. The state teacher did not make a sound, instead he sneered proudly, you can curse, but in a while, you won't be able to curse anymore. I will pull out all the things in your head. In the future, when I succeed, I will set foot on the land of Huaxia. The unfinished wishes of the ancestors, I will complete them. I will let the sun flag be planted in every corner of Huaxia, every inch of land. All of this is thanks to you, I really have to properly thank you. The madness on the state teacher's face became more and more intense, and the words he said became more and more crazy. He actually had such a wild ambition. Arrogant. Dream on. Not only will I destroy your imperial advisor's residence, I will also go to the imperial palace and completely destroy the spiritual pillar of your island nation. And that sick ghost emperor. Last time, it was a substitute that died in his place. This time, I want his real body to be completely finished. I will burn his bones and scatter his ashes, and he will never be reincarnated. Tang Zheng frowned and glared. He was so angry that his whole body was about to be ignited. He had never cursed someone so viciously before, and had never thought of doing things so ruthlessly. But this time, he really wanted to kill the other party from the bottom of his heart. There were too many scourges in this race, and these scourges had to be completely wiped out. That way, they would be able to prevent them from doing crazy things, and prevent them from continuing to covet the magnificent Huaxia. The imperial teacher said with disdain, in your dreams, I've finished speaking. Next, your misfortune will truly descend. You can't kill me. Don't tell me you want to find your helper. Although Tang Zheng said it casually, he was already on guard against the other party's possible attack. The imperial teacher smiled mysteriously and cut his palm with his finger. Blood immediately flowed out from his palm and dripped to the ground. Tang Zheng frowned. What was he doing? The blood fell on the high platform under the state teacher's feet. Traces of red light rose from the high platform and illuminated the surroundings. The smell of blood in the air immediately became stronger. The cold wind blew, and the river water churned violently as if it was boiling. Tang Zheng's expression changed slightly as he exclaimed, what's going on? Tang Zheng, surrender obediently and you will suffer less. Otherwise, it will be too late for you to regret it. The state teacher's voice became ethereal and passed through the strong wind. Tang Zheng subconsciously took 3 steps back. He could clearly feel the danger. Using blood as a guide, what was the state teacher summoning? Tang Zheng could not help but remember the military training experience outside the northwestern border town. The demons also used human blood as a guide. Furthermore, they used a large amount of human blood as a guide to set up a formation and brought back the demon god from the outland. The state teacher was doing the same. Was he also trying to summon something from the outland? No, this was an island nation. It had nothing to do with the outland. Then why was he doing this? Before Tang Zheng could figure out the relationship between them, a wet thing suddenly fell on top of his head. He subconsciously raised his head to look. Suddenly, his heart almost jumped out of his throat. A bloody mouth stopped right on top of his head. The pair of long fangs were terrifying. Demonic beast. This thought immediately appeared in his mind. At the same time, his body had already made the corresponding move. He tapped the tip of his foot and quickly slid backward, trying to avoid this ferocious fellow. Without a doubt, the state teacher used blood as a guide to summon this monster. He did not expect that there would be demonic beasts in the island nation. The ninjutsu of the island nation was only the tip of the iceberg of Huaxia. Its development was far behind Huaxia. At that time, Huaxia was the Celestial Empire. Island nation was equivalent to a primitive society. However, he had never heard of a demonic beast in an island nation. Demonic beasts did not appear casually. At that time, there were no demonic beasts in the western and eastern world. Only in Huaxia would there be demonic beasts. That was because Huaxia was the center of the world. The spiritual energy was the most abundant, and cultivation would be faster there. Which demonic beast would be stupid enough to go to a place with thin spiritual energy? Wouldn't that be going against themselves? Therefore, Tang Zheng was so surprised to see a demonic beast here. Moreover, this demonic beast's cultivation was obviously not low. Squeak squeak. Xiao Bai stared at the other party and let out a sharp cry. Xiao Bai used to be arrogant when facing the thundercloud beast and even the five-clawed golden dragon. But now, after a series of fierce battles and being injured, his momentum involuntarily weakened a lot. Hearing Xiao Bai's cry, the demonic beast's lantern-like eyes immediately showed suspicion. It was slightly startled, but it did not retreat. Instead, it moved closer. Tang Zheng's heart tightened. This was troublesome. Since the other party was not afraid of Xiao Bai, it meant that the other party's cultivation was really not ordinary. No wonder the state teacher was fearless. It turned out that he had such a helper. Tang Zheng immediately realized why Wu Junshan and the others were imprisoned here. Because, in front of this level of demonic beast, Wu Junshan and the others were obviously powerless. When the state teacher saw the demonic beast, his eyes flashed with awe. If Junko was here, perhaps she would understand the state teacher's words. Even if he wanted to release Wu Junshan and the others, it was impossible to do so. Because Wu Junshan and the others had already fallen into the hands of this demonic beast, the state teacher was powerless. Moreover, the state teacher could not really control this demonic beast, which could be seen from the awe in his eyes. Tang Zheng, you have no way out. Resistance is futile. Master Orochi, please restrain him. He has many Chinese spells in his head. The state preceptor urged excitedly. Huaxia God? What the hell is that? Why have I never heard of it? Tang Zheng thought. No one answered his question, because that pair of huge eyes had already burst out a terrifying light, and a pair of fangs directly bit towards Tang Zheng. Tang Zheng continued to retreat. Suddenly, Xiao Bai screamed loudly. Tang Zheng was shocked and felt a strong wind behind him. Damn it! He slashed backwards with his sword, but missed. He quickly turned his head to look. Damn! Tang Zheng could not help but curse. Behind him was actually a huge head, with lantern-sized eyes and long fangs, and droplets of saliva dripped down from the fangs. Why are there two demonic beasts? Tang Zheng felt a headache. Just one demonic beast was enough to make him suffer. Two demonic beasts, wouldn't that be asking for his life? But he did not have time to sigh and quickly moved to the left. Bang! He bumped into something hard and elastic, which bounced him back immediately. He looked carefully. Damn! It was another huge head that looked exactly the same. In the darkness, he could not see what he crashed into, but it was definitely the body of this demonic beast. 3 demonic beasts. How could this damn island nation have so many demonic beasts? Was this a zoo? Tang Zheng felt bitter in his mouth, but before he could digest all of this, a few lantern-sized eyes lit up in the darkness. Lantern-like eyes floated above their heads, and there were the same fangs. In the end, there were actually 8 heads. 8 demonic beasts. Tang Zheng really felt like his heart had died. There were actually so many demonic beasts, and each of them was very powerful. How could Tang Jing deal with them? Xiao Bai's eyes also changed. It was not afraid of anything, but its small eyes revealed a rare look of worry. Huh, Tang Jing, now you've given up? The state preceptor stood on the high platform, arrogant and proud as he asked. Tang Jing gritted his teeth and said, "You relied on these demonic beasts to catch them, right? Humph, you're smart. Don't think that you're the only one with divine beasts. Our island nation also has divine beasts, and they're much more powerful than your little one." The state preceptor obviously did not admit that they were demonic beasts, but classified these beasts as divine beasts. Tang Jing snorted, "Demonic beasts are demonic beasts. Where did divine beasts come from? Far-fetched, sticking gold on your face, don't you feel ashamed?" If they really talked about divine beasts, perhaps only the 5-clawed golden dragon could be called divine beasts. As for Xiao Bai, even the 5-clawed golden dragon could not figure out its origin, so Tang Jing did not know whether it was a demonic beast or a divine beast. The state preceptor's face flushed red, and he angrily said, "You dare to be rude to God Orochi, Tang Jing, in a moment, you will beg for death." Humph, so the so-called state preceptor's biggest reliance is not you, but these demonic beasts. The world has really been deceived by you. As long as you stay, the world will still not know this secret. In the future, when I set foot on the land of Huaxia, the world will see the divine power of Orochi. The state preceptor's eyes shone as he said with yearning. Chapter 691. Tang Jing rushed towards the stalactite in an attempt to save him. However, just as his body rose into the air, a whooshing sound came from behind him. He cursed inwardly and without turning his head, he stabbed with his sword. Clang! Sparks flew everywhere. The War Soul sword stabbed into the incomparably hard scales, only causing a huge head to tilt its direction slightly. However, the other heads had already chased after him like shadows. 2 bloody mouths, one above and one below, seemed to want to tear Tang Jing into 2 halves. Tang Jing had no other choice but to save himself. The bright sword light soared into the sky. Since the opponent's scales were so hard, he did not plan to fight head-on. Instead, he planned to use his wits. He cleverly feinted, the sword tip turned, and directly pierced towards a large eyeball. The eyes were definitely the weakest part of a demonic beast, so Tang Jing concentrated his strength and prepared to attack the eyes. Puff! A bloody light shot out from the eyeball. The blood was like spring water, gushing up more than a meter high. Roar! The demonic beast let out a heart-wrenching scream. A violent stench gushed out from its throat, causing Tang Jing's stomach to churn. He almost vomited out the food he had last night. However, he gritted his teeth and endured it. The War Soul sword tried to stab forward again, but the other head had already rushed over. With a kacha sound, the 2 fangs bit onto the War Soul sword. Bang! His head fiercely swung, and Tang Jing was like a cannonball that was sent flying, fiercely smashing into the stone wall, and tumbling down. The demonic beast's screams echoed in the surroundings. It kept twisting its body. It was obviously in extreme pain. The eyeball was completely covered in blood. This sword caused the eyeball to go blind. Insignificant human, I will eat you. I will swallow the powder you chewed into my stomach. A sharp voice suddenly rang out, echoing in Tang Jing's ears. Tang Jing was not surprised. The other party's cultivation was so high that it was normal for him to speak human language. Hearing the other party's words, Tang Jing's head twitched as if he had understood something. He asked in horror, "You ate the owner of those bones?" "Of course, it won't be long before you join them," the demonic beast said ruthlessly. Tang Jing glared at him, and his anger flared up. He didn't have much good or bad feelings towards demonic beasts, but this demonic beast actually ate humans. That was absolutely unforgivable. He also finally understood why those people were hung upside down in the air like pieces of bacon. It turned out that they were all food stored by the demonic beasts. Evil creature, What kind of demonic beast are you? Tang Zheng asked angrily. Do you want to see my real body? Then I will fulfill your wish. The demonic beast said proudly. In an instant, the entire cave was filled with rustling sounds, and the waves in the river grew bigger and bigger, as if many things were quietly moving. Tang Zheng's heart tightened, and he was on full alert. Not long after, a huge monster completely appeared from the darkness, almost filling the entire cave. Tang Zheng's eyes gradually widened into circles as he looked at everything in front of him in disbelief. There was only one word in his mind: ferocious. The scene in front of him was too ferocious. If a timid person saw it, they would probably be scared to death. Tang Zheng was experienced and knowledgeable, but he was also deeply shocked. It turned out that his previous understanding was all wrong. The other party was not an 8-headed demonic beast, but a single demonic beast. However, it had 8 heads and 8 tails. This strange combination looked ugly and ferocious. Its entire body was black, covered with scales the size of a face, suffused with a black light. Just now, Tang Zheng's War Soul sword was unable to break through the scales, so one could imagine how strong its defense was. It gave people another impression that it was big. It was too big, so big that it almost filled the entire space, but there was still a part of it hidden in the darkness and the river. This was its real body, which made people tremble with fear. Tang Zheng had even seen the 5-clawed golden dragon, but the 5-clawed golden dragon gave people a feeling of heaven's might. But this demonic beast, in addition to being ferocious, was cold, making people feel as if they had fallen into an ice cave. It was a completely different feeling. Immortal, this looks like the legendary Yamada no Orochi. Gue Qiansue's small head suddenly came out of the backpack, looking at everything in front of him, and thoughtfully said. Yamada no Orochi? What's its origin? Tang Zheng heard that the state preceptor just called the demonic beast as Yamada no Orochi. He was afraid that Yamada no Orochi was its real name. Yamada no Orochi is a very ferocious demonic beast. Its body is a flood dragon, and it especially likes to eat people. Every time it eats 10,000 people, it will grow one more head and one more tail. Therefore, its strength will also increase by leaps and bounds. In order to pursue higher cultivation and strength, it ate people everywhere. Finally, it grew 8 heads and 8 tails. Legend has it that as long as it grows 9 heads and 9 tails, it can enter the dragon gate and transform into a 9-clawed golden dragon. Gue Qiansui said tirelessly. Only the 5-clawed golden dragon was imprisoned in the imperial city, but Yamada no Orochi could transform into a 9-clawed golden dragon. As the name suggests, it must be many times more powerful than the 5-clawed golden dragon. What? It ate tens of thousands of people and killed so many people, and it can still transform into a dragon? Tang Zheng was shocked and felt a chill in his heart. When ordinary people mentioned the famous ancient generals, they would often say that they killed thousands of people, but compared to Yamada no Orochi, they paled in comparison. Not only did it kill people, but it also ate people. It swallowed the bones into its stomach, and it ate tens of thousands of people. This was simply an astronomical number, and it was enough to show its deranged nature. For cultivation and strength, it had completely lost its nature. In Hua Xia's legends, the dragon had always been a righteous image. It was a sacred symbol. For such an evil demon beast to be able to transform into a dragon, it was like a big stone pressing down on one's chest, making one unable to breathe. Yes, exalted immortal. Although it had killed so many people, it still had a chance to transform into a dragon. Back then, it was only a step away from becoming a 9-clawed golden dragon. When it ate the 80,000th person, its 9th head and 9th tail immediately grew out. At that time, it was precisely the time when it transformed into a dragon. It was also the time when it was at its weakest. A very powerful cultivator appeared and fought with it for 81 days. In the end, the newly grown 9th head and 9th tail were cut off, and from then on, its hope of transforming into a dragon was cut off. Who was so powerful? Tang Zheng could not help but have a kind of worship. This cultivator was so great that he could fight against such a powerful evil beast by himself. There was no doubt that if Orochi really transformed into a 9-clawed golden dragon, with its cruel nature, it would definitely cause more killings. The good deed of this Shouja had saved countless lives. Guo Qiansui shook his head. I don't know who this cultivator is. Later on, no one knew the whereabouts of Orochi. Some people said it was dead, but no one expected it to survive and hide here. Tang Jing gradually became enlightened. No wonder Orochi appeared in the island nation. At that time, the island nation was a barren land, and no demon beast or cultivator came here. In order to avoid being hunted down, Orochi crossed the ocean and came to the island nation. That was why it survived until today. Since it was only one step away from becoming a 9-clawed golden dragon, does that mean its cultivation and strength are still ridiculously high? Tang Jing suddenly realized a serious problem. If it was really so powerful, it would be invincible in this world. With its cruel nature and the tyrannical nature of the island nation, it would be the end of the world. No, when his 9th head and 9th tail were chopped off, most of his power went down the drain. So, its strength was greatly reduced. Otherwise, it would not have to escape to this barren land. Guo Qiansui explained. Tang Jing heaved a sigh of relief as he thought that it was a close call. All of this was thanks to the powerful cultivator from back then. If he knew who this person was, then Tang Jing would definitely thank him. However, I feel that its strength is still very strong. According to the legend, its strength should not be so strong. Guo Qiansui said with some doubts. Tang Jing had an idea, and said, You mean it has recovered its strength? Yes, and it has recovered a lot. Did it eat a lot of people again? Tang Jing felt a chill in his bones. Guo Qiansui hesitated, and said, It's possible. Tang Jing turned his head and stared at Orochi. He felt more and more disgusted. He did not know how many people were buried in its stomach. The conversation between the two was heard by Orochi and the state preceptor. Orochi twisted its huge body, and looked at Guo Qiansui covetously, and said, You have heard of my deeds, not simple. Humph, but you know it too late. Now I have recovered half of my strength, and there are no powerful cultivators in this world. So, no one can stop me. I want to eat more people. Moreover, I found that martial artists and cultivators are the most delicious and can increase my strength the most. Therefore, I will eat all the martial artists and cultivators in the world who don't listen to my orders. That way, my strength will recover faster. Orochi's 8 big heads were raised high, ferocious and crazy. Tang Jing trembled in fear when he heard this. He glanced at the Imperial Preceptor from afar and said with disdain, Imperial Preceptor, you are really crazy. You are using your own people to feed this evil beast and help it recover its strength. You are helping the tyrant. There will be a day when you will suffer the consequences of your own actions. The state preceptor laughed crazily. Who said I use my own people to feed Orochi? I will not be so stupid. Tang Jing's face changed slightly. Then where did you find so many people? Oh, of course, it is Huaxia people. There are so many Huaxia people. Isn't it a small matter to sacrifice tens of thousands of people? Hasn't your country always wanted to control the population? I am doing you a big favor. The state preceptor said ferociously. You are crazy. Tang Jing was furious. The state preceptor wanted to kill Huaxia people, and it seemed that many Huaxia people had been buried in Orochi's stomach. No. Tang Jing suddenly realized a problem. If so many Huaxia people disappeared for no reason, there must be some news. Chapter 692. Shameless, where did you go to kill so many of my compatriots? Tang Jing asked loudly. Those people were your ancestors. They had already cooked the delicious food of Orochi great god decades ago. The state preceptor said proudly. Tang Jing raised his eyebrows and couldn't help but be confused. What did this have to do with what happened decades ago? Since you are going to die soon, I am not afraid to tell you. Do you really think that the invasion war was so simple? One of the original intentions of starting this war was to find people to improve the cultivation of Orochi Great God, and Huaxia is the country with the largest population near our country. Of course, we fixed our eyes on you. A dusty conspiracy slowly unfolded. Perhaps many of the people involved in the war back then were not aware of this secret. Today, Tang Jing also felt a sense of horror and absurdity when he heard it. It turned out that there were so many unknown secrets in the war that attracted the attention of the world. In the end, we captured tens of thousands of captives and then helped Orochi Great God improve his cultivation. If the war had not ended early and Orochi Great God had eaten more people, he would have recovered his former power. Why bother with this? The state preceptor's words seemed to be regretful that he could not capture more Huaxia people. Tang Zheng was already furious. In this world, was there such a cruel and crazy person in the world? Too many Huaxia people died in that war, and many Huaxia people disappeared for no reason. This was a well-known fact. Those missing people must have been transported back to the country by the island nation and then offered to Orochi. Perhaps, Huaxia people did not know about this. The island nation's conspiracy was too deep. Tang Zheng, just you wait. After you die, it won't be long before we set foot on your land again, and then use more people to help Orochi improve his cultivation. At that time, the world will tremble under the iron hooves of the island nation. The state preceptor was enraptured, as if he could see the day he described. Tang Zheng's face kept changing, from red to green, and then to black. His mood was really fluctuating, and anger was running through every cell of his body. State preceptor, keep dreaming. That day will never come. Huaxia is no longer what it used to be. Even if I really die, the people of Huaxia will definitely rise up and fight back. They will kick you out of our country like beating a drowning dog. Tang Zheng said vehemently. The state preceptor was unmoved and said, "Hee, then we shall wait and see. However, you will not be able to see that day." Then, he changed the topic and said respectfully to Orochi, "Orochi, this person not only injured your eyes, which is an unforgivable crime. Moreover, if you let him leave and make news about you public, it will definitely attract enemies to deal with you. Therefore, you must keep him here." Orochi shook his head and wagged his tail. "I don't need you to command me. I will capture him alive and take all the knowledge in his head for my own use." The state preceptor nodded enviously and did not dare to say more. He retreated to the side and left the battlefield to Orochi. Orochi slithered, and his huge body had already surrounded Tang Zheng from all directions. Tang Zheng was like a sandwich biscuit, surrounded in the center. Tang Zheng clenched his teeth as he understood that this was a battle to the death. If he were to live, he would be able to expose Japan's conspiracy to the public. If he were to die, then perhaps China would really face a huge disaster. Therefore, he must fight with all his strength. Bah! He spat a mouthful of saliva and rubbed his palms. He touched Whitey on his shoulder and Gue Qiansui in his backpack and said, "This is a life and death battle. We can only fight to the death." Xiao Bai nodded heavily and squeaked in response to Tang Zheng's mobilization. Gue Qiansui jumped out of the backpack and landed on the ground. He said, "Immortal, you will be invincible. We can definitely leave here safely." Tang Zheng nodded and said to Xiao Bai on his shoulder in a low voice, "Xiao Bai, I will hold off Orochi, and you go and save the hanging people." Xiao Bai seemed to understand and nodded. Tang Zheng took a deep breath and took the lead to take a step forward. He rushed up with War Soul in his hand and shouted, "Kill!" Whoosh! When Transcendent Flying Immortal was used, a series of exquisite sword moves immediately greeted Yamada no Orochi. Yamada no Orochi blinked contemptuously, and its huge body began to move. This space was too narrow, and it could not fully exert its advantage of being a huge monster. Its fighting power was limited a lot. Tang Zheng relied on his nimble movements to engage in a fierce battle with it. He was like a dancing butterfly, shuttling between the fangs of Yamada no Orochi and its huge tail. He was surrounded by danger. The war soul sword slashed at the scales of the Yamada no Orochi, creating sparks. It was like a dazzling firework, illuminating this narrow space more and more. The darkness was dispelled, and Orochi's body was revealed. Tang Zheng's heart was beating like a drum. If there was enough space to display its full strength, it would be hundreds of meters long, which was a bit bigger than the thundercloud beast's body. Such a huge body had been hiding in this small space. No one knew if it felt aggrieved. Tang Zheng held back Yamada no Orochi. Even though his cultivation was much weaker, he had learned too many things. As long as he was not surrounded by danger, he would often have many tricks up his sleeve to turn danger into safety. At this moment, he was no longer limited to the heaven-flying immortal sword technique. Although the heaven-flying immortal sword technique could make him flustered against the Imperial advisor, it might not be useful against Orochi. Therefore, the wind-chasing sword technique, heaven-shocking bow and sun-shooting arrow were all used by Tang Zheng at the right time. Weapons and martial arts were used interchangeably, causing people to be dazzled and Orochi to go crazy. You are so young, yet you know so many spells and so many powerful treasures. Who taught you this anomaly? Orochi asked angrily. Tang Zheng coldly snorted and said, I, your grandfather, am a self-taught genius. You're courting death. After being scolded, Orochi flew into a rage, and its attack suddenly became even sharper. Tang Zheng's situation was no longer optimistic. Boom! A huge tail swept over fiercely. Tang Zheng already had no way to retreat, and even the war soul sword was unable to hastily fight back. Tang Zheng immediately activated the 9 revolutions Vajra technique. His entire body was like steel, preparing to take this attack head-on. Immortal, let me do it. It was unknown when Gue Qiansui arrived in front of Tang Zheng, but it suddenly became bigger, like a huge shield, blocking in front of Tang Zheng. Bang! The huge tail swept across the turtle shell, producing a loud muffled sound. Tang Zheng could clearly see the pain in Gue Qiansui's eyes, and his heart tightened. Previously, when the Imperial Tutor's broken sword slashed on its turtle shell, it did not feel so much pain. It could be imagined that Orochi's attack was much stronger than the Imperial Tutor's attack. Gue Qiansui endured this attack without moving an inch, afraid that it would hurt Tang Zheng. Ever since Gue Qiansui followed Tang Zheng, not only did Tang Zheng give him cultivation techniques, he also took care of him. But he did not report too much to Tang Zheng. In this life and death situation, he naturally had to stand up and fight for Tang Zheng. He knew how powerful Orochi was, but he still did not retreat, which showed his intention. Tang Zheng also saw Gue Qiansui's intention from this action. At that time, it was a coincidence that he took Gue Qiansui in. Perhaps, deep in his heart, he still had a grudge against Gue Qiansui's actions. But when Yamada no Orochi's attack landed on Gue Qiansui's body, the grudge in Tang Zheng's heart was immediately shattered into pieces, and there was nothing left. A little turtle wants to be a hero, blocking my way. You're courting death. Orochi's anger was strong, and he did not hide his contempt for Gue Qiansui. Bang! Another huge tail swept Gue Qiansui, and the pain in Gue Qiansui's eyes became more intense, and he staggered forward. His cultivation was much lower than Orochi's. If he did not rely on his race's natural defense advantage, he would not be Orochi's opponent at all. But even so, it was a little overwhelmed after taking 2 hits head-on. Seeing this, Tang Zheng shouted, Gue Qiansui, I'll do it. Like a whirlwind, he bypassed Gue Qiansui and went to meet the huge tail, and the war soul sword had been slashed out. However, that giant tail was just a feint. On the other side, another giant tail quietly appeared. Tang Zheng did not have time to defend and only heard a muffled sound as the sky and earth spun. He saw stars and his throat felt sweet as he spat out a mouthful of blood. You overestimate yourself. Orochi said disdainfully. While Tang Zheng was still in the air, 2 huge tails flew in the air and rolled him with lightning speed. Crack! Crack! With a crisp sound of bones, Tang Jing spat out a big mouthful of blood. He really felt that his bones were about to be crushed by the huge twisting force. He quickly ran the 9 transformation Vajra tactics, which offset the twisting force, but he had been rolled up and could not move at all. Was he going to be captured like this? At the same time, Xiaobai had quietly jumped on the roof and came to the stalactites. The small mouth took a few deep breaths, and suddenly spat out a huge flame. Whoosh! The amber-like surface melted immediately, and a series of falling sounds were heard. One by one, the pieces of meat fell to the ground, and the amber on the surface was immediately shattered. One by one, they woke up. In an instant, dozens of people stood up. Although they were a little embarrassed, they were like peerless divine soldiers, full of endless fighting spirit. Everyone's eyes were burning with rage. Although they were imprisoned and couldn't move, their consciousness hadn't disappeared. Every day, they were immersed in endless pain. It was not the pain of facing death, but the pain of watching their companions die in the mouth of Orochi. They could not do anything, and this feeling almost made them collapse. Of course, the conspiracy of Orochi and the island nation made them even angrier. It turned out that there were so many conspiracies hidden in the war decades ago. Martial arts sect also participated in that war, and many people were sacrificed, so that feeling was even more empathetic. Chapter 693. With so many people suddenly regaining their freedom, the killing intent they emitted caused one's heart to sway. The Imperial Grandmaster's heart couldn't help but jump a few times, but when he saw the Yamada no Orochi, his worries immediately disappeared. With the Yamada no Orochi here, all enemies were paper tigers that couldn't withstand a single blow. Lan Yu saw Tang Jing, who was tangled in a ball by the giant tail, and her beautiful eyes immediately turned red. She was as cold as a knife as she shouted, "Let him go." Before she finished speaking, she had already rushed out like an arrow. Like a willow catkin, she lightly landed on Yamada no Orochi's body. She kicked off the pitch-black scales with the tips of her feet and flew up. A slender hand reached out, and 2 fingers grabbed onto a protruding piece of the scale as if they were picking a flower. Break! An earth-shattering word came out of Lan Yu's mouth. Her fingers immediately brought about a bloody light, and the scale armor was actually removed by her. Roar! A roar mixed with pain came from the bloody mouth, and the giant tail that was wrapping around Tang Jing couldn't help but loosen a little. Tang Jing's eyes lit up, and he jumped out. The War Soul's sword immediately slashed out a ray of fire on the scale armor, and with the help of the rebound, he landed on the ground far away. Looking up, he saw that the slim figure was still standing on the huge body, holding the huge black scale armor. She stood proudly and glared at the Yamada no Orochi. "I'm going to eat you." The Yamada no Orochi shook its head and bit towards Lan Yu with its bloody mouth. Lan Yu did not move. She waved her hand forward, and the scale armor between her fingers flew out with a whoosh. Like a black bolt of lightning, it shot towards the bloody mouth. Ka-cha! The scale armor accurately hit a fang that was shining with a cold light. With a crisp sound, the fang was broken into 2. Roar! Another even more miserable cry rang out. It shook the heavens and the earth, causing the rocks on the ceiling to fall down. 5 giant tails swept towards Lan Yu at the same time. Whiz! Lan Yu retreated lightly, but the giant tail followed her like a shadow. Its speed was even faster than Lan Yu's, and it caught up with her in an instant. Lan Yu's expression changed slightly. She clenched her teeth and prepared to turn around to face the enemy. However, as she was in midair, her attack power was inevitably greatly reduced. Right at this moment, a pair of large hands appeared behind her. The palms flipped and drew 9 circles. In an instant, an endless stream of energy gushed out from the circles, blocking the giant tails. When Lan Yu saw the man beside her, she couldn't help but feel relieved. Of course, this was Wu Junshan. His yin-yang harmony art had already been cultivated to perfection. His ability to use softness to overcome hardness and weakness to overcome strength could be said to have reached perfection. Bang! There was a shocking sound of impact, and the shockwave spread in all directions. Stones kept falling from the walls. Go! Wu Junshan pulled his wife's hand and quickly retreated, avoiding Orochi's attack range. The Imperial Preceptor looked at this scene with a gloomy expression. He was greatly shocked. In his mind, Orochi was a lofty and inviolable existence. However, these people had actually injured it. Moreover, Lan Yu's elegant posture and Wu Junshan's unfathomable yin-yang harmony art made the Imperial Preceptor feel a chill run down his spine. Only now did he truly experience the strength of the warriors in Huaxia. Moreover, it wasn't the strength of a single person, but the strength of many. This was a kind of accumulation, and it was impossible for a newly risen island nation to have such accumulation. The Imperial Preceptor often thought that if the island nation had a few powerhouses like him, they could start another war and set foot on the rich land of Huaxia even without the help of Orochi's divine power. But now, it seemed that his idea was absurd and laughable. Even if there were a few Grandmaster stage powerhouses like him, if they stepped into Huaxia, they would only be able to enter vertically and come out horizontally. At this moment, he couldn't help but rejoice that the island nation had the protection of Orochi. This was the blessing of the heavens for the island nation. Otherwise, if the island nation wanted to rise, it would be a fool's dream. He looked at these dozens of experts, and his eyes had already turned as cold as snow. He muttered to himself, "What's the use of you escaping? You're still going to be a delicious meal in Orochi's stomach." Humph. Thus, he looked down from above, ready to enjoy the moving scene of Orochi eating them one by one. Orochi raised its head high, and its 8 heads looked down at the crowd from above. Only 15 of its 16 lantern-sized eyeballs were left. The blood from the eyeballs that had been blinded by the War Soul sword had already stopped, but they had turned blood red and lost their light. There were only 15 of its long fangs left. The broken fangs were like a huge mockery, silently mocking Orochi's arrogance and conceit. Lan Yu and Tang Zheng, this pair of mother and son, had both given Orochi a heavy blow. Facing the condescending Orochi, everyone subconsciously gathered together. Lan Yu impatiently grabbed onto Tang Zheng's hand, tears flowing down her cheeks. In fact, she was a very strong person deep down in her bones. In terms of martial arts, she was not inferior to her country. However, at this moment, her mother's nature was acting up. Her usual strength collapsed and was shattered by the impact of her tears. After surviving a calamity, Lan Yu's feelings were especially deep. Ever since she had set up camp on the island, her thoughts towards Tang Zheng had been like a torrential river, accumulating over time, becoming deeper and deeper. However, she knew that Tang Zheng had a grudge against her, so she didn't dare to call him personally. Every time, she would ask about Tang Zheng from Wu. She even recorded her conversation with Wu, and every time she thought of Tang Zheng, she would play the recording. Although she couldn't hear Tang Zheng's voice, listening to Wu talk about Tang Zheng's life was also a great happiness, and could slightly ease her longing. She often thought that if there was a day when Tang Zheng was able to completely open his heart and forgive her, that would be the greatest fortune of her life. Her life would truly be complete. However, she knew that this was practically an extravagant hope. She didn't know how long it would take for it to come true. However, before she could wait for that day, she was captured by Orochi. She realized that her life was about to come to an end, and her longing for Tang Zheng grew by the day. At the same time, she regretted not being able to stay by Tang Zheng's side, not being able to participate in his growth, not being able to fulfill her duties and responsibilities as a mother. She felt that she had truly failed in this life. But there was no way to salvage all of this. She couldn't even see Tang Zheng for the last time. However, the situation had taken a turn, and Tang Zheng had actually come to save them. This caused her to be wild with joy, but at the same time, she felt extremely ashamed. She couldn't do anything for him, but he actually came from afar to save them. This action caused her to be unable to show her face, but at the same time, she was incomparably moved. Therefore, when she saw Tang Jing being trapped by Orochi, her heart felt as if it was being twisted by a knife. Once she was free, she would risk her life to save him. Holding Tang Jing's hand and looking at him from such a close distance, Lan Yu was both moved and heartbroken. All sorts of feelings welled up in her heart, and tears streamed down her cheeks. Tang Jing couldn't help but be moved. There were thousands of words stuck in his chest, but he couldn't say them. You really are a silly child. It was so dangerous, but you still came to save us. Lan Yu said with a choked voice. Wu Junshan also patted Tang Jing's shoulder twice. Although he didn't say a word, thousands of words were expressed in this action. You still have the leisure to reminisce? I'll eat you first. Orochi saw that he was ignored, and felt that his dignity had been swept to the ground. He roared in anger. Lan Yu raised her head and said, This ugly monster is so annoying. It ate so many of our compatriots. Kill it, cut open its stomach, skin it, and pull out its tendons. That's right. Last time, we were tricked by it, and that was why we were captured. This time, it won't be so easy. Everyone said excitedly. Tang Jing's heart moved, and he asked curiously, How did you get caught here? It's all because of this damned Yamada no Orochi. One day, it attacked our island. We didn't expect it to be so powerful. While we were fighting, it suddenly spat out a large amount of poisonous fog. We were careless and inhaled the poisonous fog. We were caught by it and brought here. Lan Yu said indignantly. Tang Jing suddenly realized that the traces of battle he saw on the island must have been left behind by the Yamada no Orochi when he fought with them. It was just that no one expected the Yamada no Orochi to be able to spit out poisonous mist, which was why so many people were plotted against. Otherwise, with their cultivation, how could they have been annihilated without a sound? Tang Jing raised his head, looked at the imperial advisor from afar, and said, Since you have already captured them, why did you send a warship to bombard the island? Why bother? If it wasn't for the fact that he and Wu coincidentally encountered the warship bombing the island, they probably wouldn't have been able to find them even if they dug 3 feet into the ground. It was even more impossible for them to track them down and save them from the bloody mouth of the Orochi. No one in the world knows of the existence of the Orochi. In order to cover up the whereabouts of the Orochi, we must bomb that island. The imperial advisor said arrogantly. Since it was the Li Palace who told you their whereabouts, could it be that the Li Palace doesn't know of the existence of the Orochi? Tang Jing asked suspiciously. The imperial advisor laughed complacently. Of course not, only the imperial advisor and the heavenly emperor know of the existence of the Orochi. No one else in the world knows of its existence. The Li Palace is thousands of miles away, how could they know? Then why did they tell you this news? Of course I can guess 1 or 2 of the Li Palace's thoughts. They saw that the island nation's strength was getting stronger and stronger, so they deliberately used this incident to test our strength. I was just pushing the boat with the current. These people are not ordinary people, but martial artists, and there are even great master martial artists. The effect of eating them is 100 or 1,000 times better than eating ordinary people. It will allow the Orochi's cultivation to recover faster. So you did not hesitate to expose the true strength of the island nation to capture them? Tang Jing suddenly realized. Chapter 694. Hearing this, Tang Jing was enlightened. So there was such a secret. Moreover, Li Xiaotian did not tell him the complete truth. This woman was already at the final juncture of life and death, yet she was still hiding things from him. The Li Palace was truly sinister. They actually used the lives of Wu Junshan and the others to test the imperial advisor's residence. They had truly placed a large enough bait. When Wu Junshan and the others heard that they were trapped because of the Li Palace's instigation, they gnashed their teeth in anger. Back then, when the martial sect fell apart, Granny Li was also present. She even supported a few elders, forcing Wu Junshan to leave the martial sect. Thus, they had long regarded the Li Palace and Granny Li as enemies. Now, with the old and new grudges added together, they could not wait to kill their way into the Li Palace and take revenge. Of course, Wu Junshan was also furious, but he controlled himself for the time being. He was rather shocked. The island he had chosen was extremely well hidden, and no one else knew about it. Yet the Li Palace had managed to find their tracks in just a few short months. This intelligence network was absolutely terrifying. Wu Junshan shook his head and muttered, "From what I know of the Li Palace, their intelligence network is limited to within the country. They are not very developed outside of the country. How could even that island not escape their sharp eyes? No, there must be a problem." Plus or minus, suddenly, a thought flashed through his mind. His expression became serious. Could this be related to the mysterious power behind Granny Li? Wu Junshan had always guessed that there was an even deeper boss behind Granny Li and the elders. This person had always been behind the scenes, unwilling to show himself. However, to be able to make someone as arrogant as Granny Li submit, this person was definitely not an ordinary person. This person's strength and influence were probably more powerful than Wu Junshan had imagined. Then it was not completely impossible for this person to be able to track their whereabouts. Everything could be explained. Although he had figured it all out, Wu Junshan could not feel happy. This meant that he and his subordinates would have nowhere to hide in the future. In this vast world, there was probably no place for them to hide. Wu Junshan faintly sighed. Lan Yu keenly sensed his low mood and asked, "What's wrong?" "Nothing." Wu Junshan calmed himself down and put on a cold face. He said in an unquestionable tone, "You guys go first. I'll cover you. Especially since you're injured, Tang Zheng. You can't stay here any longer. This place is too dangerous. Sect Master, we won't leave. We want to fight alongside you." The others said resolutely, as if they were ready to sacrifice themselves for a cause. "This is an order. Are you going to disobey?" Wu Junshan's face darkened as he shouted. Immediately, no one refuted him, but their eyes were filled with reluctance to part with him. However, Tang Jing stubbornly raised his neck and said indifferently, "I'm not your subordinate. You have no right to order me around." Wu Junshan revealed an awkward expression and said resentfully, "You're injured, don't force yourself." Tang Jing snorted coldly and declined to comment. Lan Yu grabbed Tang Jing's hand tightly and said, "Listen to him. We'll bring up the rear. You go first." Tang Jing looked deeply at her and firmly shook his head. "Huh, you guys are just going back and forth like this. What do you think this place is? You think you can come and go as you please?" The state teacher saw this and mocked. Wu Junshan raised his eyebrows and glanced at the state teacher like lightning. He said in a deep voice, "There's no need for you to be so noisy. I'll kill you first." Before he finished speaking, he had already launched an attack at the state teacher. The state teacher was shocked. He pointed forward and the river water soared into the sky, turning into a rain of swords that shot towards Wu Junshan. Wu Junshan drew a circle with his hands and the rain of swords shrunk inward. In an instant, they were completely trapped by the circle and turned into a ball of water. "Go!" With a shout, Wu Junshan pushed his hands outwards. The ball of water was like a meteor flying from the sky, fiercely smashing towards the state teacher. The state teacher wanted to dodge, but found that he couldn't. Thus, he watched as the water ball grew bigger and bigger in his eyes. Bang! With a loud bang, the ball of water hit his chest. Immediately, his chest quickly caved in, and he immediately spat out a mouthful of blood. He was like a kite with a broken string, ruthlessly smashing into the cave wall behind him. All of this happened in a flash. The others only saw a shadow in front of them, and everything was over. Wu Junshan wanted to take advantage of the victory to give the state teacher a fatal blow, but Yamada no Orochi had already reacted. This person actually injured the state teacher in front of its eyes, which was a great insult to it. Thus, with a deafening roar, the 8 heads and tails moved side by side, attacking Wu Junshan and everyone else. "None of you can escape." A mouthful of black fog spewed out from the bloody mouth, floating towards everyone. Be careful, it's this poisonous fog. Wu Junshan warned loudly. Everyone hurriedly held their breaths, not inhaling a trace of the poisonous fog. These people were all extraordinary martial artists. Holding their breaths was a small matter. All of a sudden, everyone held their breaths and fought with Yamada no Orochi. It had to be said that although this huge monster's combat power was limited by space, at the same time, the others were also limited by space. In such a narrow space, Yamada no Orochi's attack could reach any area, so no one could escape from its attack alone. Rumble. The earth shook, and the mountains shook. The battle was too intense. Yamada no Orochi was fighting against everyone alone, but it was not at a disadvantage at all. Instead, some people fell to the ground due to their lack of strength, injuring their muscles and bones. In the corner, the state teacher struggled to get up, wiping the blood from the corner of his mouth. His eyes were blood red, like a poisonous snake staring at its prey. He spat out a mouthful of blood, gritted his teeth, and said in a low voice, "All of you must die. I want all of you to die. None of you are a match for Yamada no Orochi." The black poisonous fog shrouded the entire space, and the light became dimmer. However, what was worse was that some people had already started coughing. Although everyone could hold their breath for a while, they couldn't do so for long. The air here was completely poisoned, and there was no way to breathe. Without air, they couldn't even maintain their lives, let alone fight. As expected, someone couldn't hold his breath and took a deep breath. Suddenly, the world seemed to be spinning, and he fell to the ground with a thud. The others were in the same situation. Wu Junshan and the others cursed inwardly. If this continued, they would be captured again. If they were really captured, there was no hope of survival. What should they do? Wu Junshan was burning with anxiety, and his moves couldn't help but be a little more disrupted. Yamada no Orochi took advantage of this opportunity and swept his huge tail at Wu Junshan's waist, immediately throwing him far away. He only stopped when he hit the wall. Sect Master. The others turned pale with fright and cried out. Unable to hold his breath, another person fell to the ground. For a moment, the battle became more and more chaotic. The scales of victory immediately tilted, and everyone felt the pressure multiplied. Tang Zheng gritted his teeth, and his cheeks were already red. He thought to himself, this can't go on. I must find a way to get fresh air. However, the way out was blocked by Yamada no Orochi, so they had no chance to escape. Upper Immortal, quickly come in here. Suddenly, Gue Qiansui's voice sounded. A huge bubble floated on the ground, and Tang Zheng felt his body become light as he was covered by the bubble. Fresh air. Tang Zheng's eyes lit up, and he took a deep breath. His limbs and bones felt unprecedentedly comfortable. His heart moved, and he immediately remembered that in the South Sea, Gue Qiansui used a bubble to cover everyone, and then they could travel freely in the sea. Tang Zheng patted his head. Why didn't I think of this trick? Gue Qiansui, quickly help the others. Tang Zheng quickly shouted. Yes, Upper Immortal. Gue Qiansui accepted the order and quickly opened his mouth. Bubbles came out from his mouth and wrapped around everyone. Huff! Everyone was relieved and took a deep breath. This long-awaited fresh air was too rare. Seeing this, the state master's eyes turned red with envy. Gue Qiansui really had many tricks up his sleeves. He even created such a bubble, which was equivalent to dissolving Yamada no Orochi's poisonous fog. Yamada no Orochi saw that his trump card was ineffective and became angrier. You little tortoise, how dare you ruin my plan? I will kill you first. Its ferocious mouth immediately bit down. Gue Qiansui was not agile enough and could not escape. He fell directly into Yamada no Orochi's mouth and was bitten by its two fangs. Gue Qiansui saw that the situation was not good, and immediately retracted his body into the tortoise shell, leaving only the shell to resist Yamada no Orochi's fangs. If you were to cultivate for another 1,000 years, perhaps I wouldn't be able to do anything to this damned tortoise shell of yours. However, you're still too inexperienced right now. Break for me. The other head said agitatedly. With a cracking sound, it was as if something had shattered. Ah! Gue Qiansui immediately let out a heart-wrenching scream. Tang Zheng's heart tightened. Although Gue Qiansui's tortoise shell was hard, it could not withstand Yamada no Orochi's fangs. He had to save Gue Qiansui and could not watch him die. Evil beast, I will fight with you. Tang Zheng roared. He pulled the heaven-shocking bow and the shooting sun arrow. He loosened his fingers and the shooting sun arrow shot towards that damned head. Huh, you want to save it? Dream on. I want you to watch it die. Yamada no Orochi proudly laughed as it shook its head and swung its tail. The other head and tail blocked the shooting sun arrow, leaving Tang Zheng with no way to deal with it. Tang Zheng was burning with anxiety. If he delayed any longer, Gue Qiansui would be dead. Seeing this, Wu Junshan, Lan Yu and the others also rushed out of the bubble at the same time. They held their breath and attacked Yamada no Orochi, trying to save Gue Qiansui from its mouth. Just at this time, Li Xiaotian's figure appeared at the door. She held Marshall in her arms and shouted, "Be careful, there is an enemy." Enemy? Chapter 695. After Li Xiaotian shouted, she was stunned by the scene in front of her. She was also someone who had fought in the Myriad Mountains, but she was still shocked by the scene in front of her. Quickly hold your breath, there's poison in the air. Seeing that she was still in a daze, Tang Zheng hurriedly reminded her. Li Xiaotian seemed to have awoken from a dream. She hurriedly circulated her energy and held her breath, but her eyes were still fixed on the scene in front of her. Wu Junshan, Lan Yu, and the others' heroic figures swayed her heart. She was the holy maiden of the Li Palace. Since she was young, she had heard of the two's illustrious names. Subconsciously, she had been instilled with the idea of competing with them in the future. But today, it seemed that the gap between her and them was too great. Looking at their heroic figures in battle, she couldn't help but be fascinated. Boom! With a loud sound, the earth quaked and the entire cave shook. The stones at the top fell down with a crash, and the river water surged several meters high. Everyone was shocked and hurriedly asked, "What's going on?" Even Yamada no Orochi had a suspicious look in his eyes. "Which enemy is here?" Tang Zheng's heart moved as he hurriedly asked. Li Xiaotian was just about to answer when suddenly, with a crack, a forecrack appeared above her head. An incomparably tyrannical power pierced through her head. Quickly dodge. Wu Junshan shouted and hurriedly stood in front of Tang Zheng. He hurriedly used the yin-yang harmony art. In the blink of an eye, 9 circles were drawn in front of him. A steady stream of energy gushed out and neutralized that terrifying power. But even so, he still couldn't stop himself from retreating several steps before coming to a stop. The others weren't as lucky as Tang Zheng. A few of them couldn't dodge in time and were directly struck by that power. Bang! 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 With a series of explosions, those people were blasted into a bloody mist. Everyone was aghast. Just what was going on? Who had launched this attack, and such a powerful one at that? Tang Zheng looked at the tall figure in front of him, his emotions fluctuating. At the critical moment, he actually risked his life to protect him. That action seemed to be a subconscious action without much thought. It was precisely this primitive impulse hidden in the depths of his heart that touched Tang Zheng's nerves. Does he really care about me that much? Tang Zheng's mind was in turmoil as he stared blankly at the back of this figure. When he was growing up, he had looked forward to the appearance of such a figure countless times. He had once learned a text called Back View. The teacher had asked him to write an essay to describe his father's back view. The other students could write beautifully, but he was at a loss for words. This was because he was a child without a father. How could he have a father? However, at this very moment, that figure appeared. He was tall and mighty, blocking that terrifying strike. His lamentation did not last long because the rumbling sound above his head was still ongoing. After this attack, a bright light pierced through the top of his head, completely illuminating every corner. Only then did everyone see the true appearance of Yamada no Orochi. It was even bigger than before, like a small mountain. Hua! The lake water penetrated through the crack like a huge waterfall, instantly drenching everyone. Roar! Yamada no Orochi looked up to the sky and roared. Its anger seemed to evaporate the lake water. The poisonous fog was washed away by the lake water, and the air was fresh again. Tang Zheng took advantage of the opponent's distraction to jump to the mouth of Yamada no Orochi like a flash of lightning. With a move of heaven flying immortal, the war soul sword fiercely slashed at the fangs that were biting Gue Qiansui. Kacha! The two fangs were cut in half. Tang Zheng grabbed Gue Qiansui and kicked the top of Yamada no Orochi's head to fly back. Seeing the delicious food in its mouth fly away, Yamada no Orochi was furious and twisted its body like a crazy demon. Rumble. Sand and stones were flying, and the cave could not hold on for long. It was on the verge of collapse, as if it could completely collapse at any time. Tang Zheng stroked Gue Qiansui's turtle shell and saw a small crack appear on the turtle shell. Blood was faintly seeping out. Tang Zheng was shocked. If he was a few steps slower, Gue Qiansui would have been bitten to pieces. Gue Qiansui, how are you? Gue Qiansui's head came out of the turtle shell. His small eyes were still filled with pain. He stammered, "Immortal, I am fine. Don't talk, I will take you out of here. I will find a way to heal you." Tang Zheng said. Gue Qiansui shook his head, "Immortal, you don't have to worry. I will cultivate for a few days and naturally can heal this wound. We turtles are one of the longest living species. Are you really okay?" "Yes." Tang Zheng was slightly relieved and carefully put Gue Qiansui into his backpack. At this time, Li Xiaotian also came to Tang Zheng's side and couldn't wait to say, "100 Change Star Lord is here." 100 Change Star Lord. Tang Zheng and Wu Junshan were shocked at the same time. The two of them had fought with the 100 Transformation Star Sovereign before, so they knew how powerful he was. Why did he come here again? Tang Zheng frowned deeply. Wasn't 100 Change Star Lord in the 100,000 Mountains? And last time, he sent the demon god to the outside world to try to recruit people to start the Mountain River blood sacrifice array. After this plot was thwarted by Tang Zheng, why did 100 Change Star Lord turn to the island nation? Strange, this is too strange. Everyone be careful, 100 Change Star Lord is not a friend, and he is super powerful. Everyone gather together, we will rush out and find a chance to escape. It was not good to stay in this place for long. It was better to leave first. No matter what 100 Change Star Lord's purpose was, it was not good to fight with him. Otherwise, this small number of people was not enough to fill the gap between his teeth. The crack above their heads was getting bigger and bigger, and they could see the blue sky and white clouds above clearly. But everyone's eyes were immediately attracted by a person floating in the air. It was a delicate child with a picturesque face, like a fairy in a painting. Who else could it be but 100 Change Star Lord? Tang Zheng and the others had a deep impression of him. Even though he looked harmless, in fact, he was a great devil. If they were not careful, they would die under his evil hands. 100 Faces Star Lord stared at the scene in the big hole with his big black eyes. The first thing that attracted his attention was Orochi. He smiled faintly and said, "You are really here, you big snake." Orochi obviously did not know how powerful 100 Change Star Lord was. He looked up to the sky and hissed, "Where did this little kid come from? I will eat you too." "Oh, he likes to eat people? Hee, that's great." 100 Change Star Lord's eyes lit up. He nodded his little head and said seriously, "If ordinary people heard about eating people, they would be scared out of their wits." But 100 Change Star Lord was very surprised. Demonic beasts should have the nature of demonic beasts. Eating people is good. Huh. Orochi had never heard such words from a human. He could not help but be stunned. He looked at 100 Change Star Lord suspiciously. Who exactly are you? Your future master must have a little servant like you. It must be fun. 100 Change Star Lord said seriously. He did not seem to be joking. Tang Zheng and the others heard this and their hearts skipped a beat. It turned out that 100 Change Star Lord was here to subdue Orochi. If he had Orochi, then 100 Change Star Lord's strength would reach a higher level. Perhaps more people would be harmed. Orochi obviously did not expect this answer. After being stunned for a moment, he laughed wildly. But the anger in his laughter was obvious. Who do you think you are? How dare you say that you can subdue me? Orochi said angrily and found it funny. Ever since he came to this world, no one had ever dared to say such arrogant words to him. You have personality. I like it. Alas, I really want to thank the demon god for giving me this information. Otherwise, I wouldn't know that there is a little guy like you in the island nation. 100 Change Star Lord sighed. Such a huge monster was called a little guy. It was ridiculous. However, Tang Zheng and the others knew that 100 Change Star Lord was a figure from the ancient times tens of thousands of years ago. Although he had a pink face, he was already a shrewd old man. It was not an exaggeration to call Orochi a little guy. What is a demon god? Yamada no Orochi asked in shock. Its whereabouts were top secret. It thought that only the state preceptor and the emperor knew about it. How could this demon god know about it? 100 Change Star Lord did not seem to intend to attack immediately. He patiently answered Orochi's questions. He said methodically, the demon god is a member of the demon clan. In order to return to this world, the demon clan sent him to this world. Your information was given to him by the higher-ups of the demon clan. Do you really think that your whereabouts are top secret? The demon clan used to be very powerful. There are not many things in this world that can be hidden from them. Of course, your whereabouts are no exception. It's just that they don't want to disclose it to the public. Orochi's expression changed when he heard this. Of course, he knew how powerful the demon clan was. The demon clan evolved from the Chi-Yu-Jiuli tribe in ancient times. They had many masters. Even in his heyday, he did not dare to break into the demon clan's base camp. Therefore, he did not doubt 100 Change Star Lord's words. Intuition told him that what 100 Change Star Lord said was true. However, this time, the demon clan asked the demon god to recruit you to strengthen the demon clan's strength and prepare for the arrival of the demon clan's main force. It's a pity that the demon god has been delayed by other things. He gave you to me for free. 100 Change Star Lord added. Everyone finally realized that this was the reason why 100 Change Star Lord appeared here. The demon clan was so insidious that they had prepared such a powerful chess piece. Tang Zheng and the others looked at each other and became very serious. Everyone knew that Orochi's fate in the hands of 100 Change Star Lord was much worse than that of the demon god. 100 Change Star Lord had enough strength to help Orochi recover its strength. That meant that more people would die and the people would be plunged into misery and suffering. Orochi stared at 100 Change Star Lord with his big round eyes and said angrily, the demon clan has disappeared from this world. No one in this world can make me surrender. You can't. Chapter 696. 100 Faces Star Lord watched as Yamada no Orochi rushed over, but he did not move. There was even a faint smile at the corner of his eyes. Seeing that Yamada no Orochi was right in front of 100 Change Star Lord, he finally moved. He gently raised his lotus-like arm. Splash! The lake water boiled and soared into the air, transforming into a giant chain that coiled around the Yamada no Orochi's gigantic body, instantly locking it in place. Roar! Yamada no Orochi looked up to the sky and roared. It rolled in the air, trying to break free from the chain. Water splashed everywhere, and the chain made cracking sounds as if it would break at any time. The 100 Change Sovereign smirked and said, "Do you want to break free? Then tighten it a little more." As soon as he finished speaking, the chain quickly contracted. Yamada no Orochi's roar became louder and louder, and it rolled more and more violently. Boom! Its huge tail swept across, and the cave collapsed completely. Thousands of huge rocks fell from above like raindrops. "Let's get out of here quickly." Tang Jing took the weapon from Li Xiaotian, carried it, stepped on the falling rocks, and rushed up. Yamada no Orochi could not even protect itself, so it did not have the time to care about them. Therefore, one by one, they rushed out of the cave like arrows. Boom! With a loud bang, the cave was buried by huge rocks. Part of Yamada no Orochi's body was buried under the rocks, and it was still twisting its body and struggling. Rocks were flying everywhere, and the scene was extremely chaotic. Tang Zheng and the others landed safely in the lake. They stepped on the lake water and quickly ran to the shore. 100 Change gaze turned, and he caught a glimpse of this group of people who suddenly appeared. They were hiding in the cave just now, and he had overlooked them. Who are these people? A question mark appeared in 100 Change mind, and he looked at them with interest. Suddenly, 100 Change pupils shrank, and he fixed his eyes on a familiar figure. He could not help but exclaim, "It's him." This figure was too familiar. It did not occupy much of a place in his memory of tens of thousands of years. However, the key was that this memory was not very old, so he managed to find it in time. Tang Zheng. He subconsciously called out softly. This name had left a deep impression on him. Back then, when the 100 Transformation Star Lord was trapped in the Buzhou Mountain, the 100 Transformation Star Lord first used the drawing ground prison technique to trap the Heaven Monk. Then, Tang Zheng and the group of uninvited guests barged in and immediately fell into the drawing ground prison. The 100 Transformation Star Lord originally wanted to turn these uninvited guests into dolls to accompany him through the long years. However, things did not go according to plan. While Tang Zheng was unable to move, he actually called upon the 4 Symbols Venerables to break his painted ground prison, freeing everyone. After that, he went through a series of fierce battles. In the end, Tang Zheng and the others quietly escaped, which was a great humiliation to him. Moreover, he had seen Tang Zheng some time ago when he attached his divine sense to the demon god. Therefore, with the new and old hatred added together, how could he forget about Tang Zheng? Looking at Tang Zheng from afar, the calm expression on the 100 Transformation Starlord's face had disappeared, replaced by a murderous aura. Tang Zheng, stop right there. The 100 Transformation Starlord shouted from above and pointed at Tang Zheng. A pillar of water rose from the lake and turned into a huge claw, grabbing at Tang Zheng. Tang Zheng hugged Marshall and turned his head slightly. When he saw the huge claw, he was shocked and prepared to defend. However, one person beat him to it. Wu Junshan stood in front of Tang Zheng to protect him. His hands formed a circle and blocked the huge claw. "You're courting death." The 100 Transformation Starlord scolded disdainfully. His small hands immediately clenched into fists. The claw instantly contracted and grabbed Wu Junshan. Wu Junshan's figure disappeared, and the others turned pale with fright and screamed, "Sect Master! Humph, let's see if you still dare to go against me." The 100 Transformation Starlord was extremely proud and turned his gaze to Tang Zheng. Suddenly, boom! With an explosion, the claw exploded and turned into water droplets that filled the sky. Wu Junshan stood proudly and stared at the 100 Transformation Starlord coldly, saying, "You want to kill me just like that? You think too little of me." The 100 Transformation Starlord was slightly stunned, but immediately became angry and prepared to attack again. At this time, Yamada no Orochi, who had been trapped by the chains, used all his skills. His body that was buried under the ground also rushed out. His huge body was completely compared to the others, like a giant compared to a small dot. With a flash of black light, his huge tail whipped the chains without hesitation. Kacha, the chains exploded one after another, turning into water droplets and falling back into the lake. The 100 Transformations Star-Lord's expression changed slightly. His attention was attracted by Tang Zheng and the others, and Yamada no Orochi took the opportunity to escape. Do you want to escape just like that? Humph, how can I let a cooked duck escape? The 100 Transformations Star-Lord said disdainfully. His upper body slightly leaned forward and swooped down with a whistling sound. The surface of the lake rippled, and the powerful shockwave almost set off waves. Yamada no Orochi, since you are still stubborn and unwilling to obediently surrender, then I will beat you until you surrender. The 100 Transformations Star-Lord said in a deep voice. Her rosy cheeks became gloomy. Yamada no Orochi raised his head and shook his head. Zhang Ye was helpless and roared, "Dream on." With a swing of his huge tail, 100-meter-tall wave rushed down at the 100 Transformations Star-Lord. The 100 Transformations Star-Lord was calm and immediately launched a counterattack. The battle was extremely fierce, and the bottom of the lake was still letting out loud noises and collapsing. Even the ground quickly caved in. The lake water seeped out from the ground and spread all the way to the distance. No one knew where it led to. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Tang Zheng and the others had already escaped to the shore. Turning their heads to look, they saw this apocalyptic scene, and all of them were greatly shocked. A battle of this level truly had the power to destroy the heavens and the earth. It was hard to imagine what kind of scene it was when the cultivators of this world ran amok. Back then, there were cultivators who were even more powerful than the 100 Transformations Star-Lord. They even had the legendary divine might to split the heavens and earth apart. It was hard to imagine what kind of scene that was. Lan Yu saw Marshall and Tang Zheng's embrace and asked with concern, "What happened to Marshall?" She was poisoned by the Imperial Advisor's goo. Her life or death is unknown. Tang Zheng looked at Marshall, whose eyes were tightly shut, and said worriedly. Lan Yu's expression changed slightly. She had only heard of the goo poison, but she had never heard of it before. Lan Yu had deep feelings for Marshall, and they were like mother and daughter. Lan Yu said anxiously, "Then what method is there to save him?" "The antidote is in the hands of the Imperial Advisor." "Where is the Imperial Advisor?" Looking around, there was no trace of the Imperial Advisor. Just now, we were only concerned about escaping and didn't pay attention to the Imperial Advisor. Could it be that he was buried at the bottom of the cave? Tang Zheng said suspiciously. Everyone looked at each other in dismay. There was no way to verify the answer. If they couldn't find the Imperial Advisor, then there was no antidote for the goo. Tang Zheng's expression immediately became even uglier. He looked at Marshall anxiously and said, "Let's leave this place first and then think of a way to save her." Everyone nodded in agreement. Wu Junshan looked deeply at Li Xiaotian, who was beside him. Li Palace and Li Xiaotian had a huge grudge. If they killed Li Xiaotian now, she would definitely have no way to resist. Li Xiaotian's expression tightened as she looked worriedly at Wu Junshan. She was also aware of the danger she was in. Her heart started to beat uncontrollably and even her breathing became hurried. Wu Junshan snorted. He had already determined from Li Xiaotian's action of hugging Marshall that she was in an alliance with his side. Thus, he said, "Don't worry, I won't kill you. But it's only limited to this time. If I meet you again, I won't be merciful." Not only did Grandma Li cause the Marshall sect to fall apart, she even revealed our whereabouts to the Imperial Advisor's residence. I will remember this debt and personally settle it with her in the future. Li Xiaotian's body relaxed. She knew she had temporarily passed this hurdle. Tang Zheng looked deeply at her and added, "Li Xiaotian, you still haven't told me the truth. You coming to the island nation to treat the emperor was just a pretense. Your true goal was to investigate the strength of the Imperial Advisor's residence." "Humph, I will also remember this debt. In the future, I will definitely not believe your words." His tone was firm and resolute. Li Xiaotian's body trembled. She wanted to say something but hesitated. But in the end, she gave up helplessly and faintly sighed. Her lie was finally exposed. The relationship between the two sides that seemed to have improved immediately fell to the freezing point. Li Xiaotian was very dejected, but there was nothing she could do. Let's go. Lan Yu urged. The dozens of people quickly fled the lake. The 100 Change Star Sovereign had been watching them. When she saw that they were about to escape, she immediately turned her spearhead towards them. All of you, stop right there. Don't even think about escaping. The 100 Change Star Sovereign angrily roared. Her small hand grabbed at the air and the lake water immediately condensed into a long spear. She quickly attacked everyone. Wu Junshan stopped and turned to face the long spear. Without turning his head, he shouted, "You guys go quickly. I will cover the rear." Tang Zhang's expression was slightly strange. The others all stopped and shouted, "We will lend you a hand, Sect Master." Stop right there. Do you want to disobey my order? Wu Junshan roared, "Lan Yu, take them away." Lan Yu looked deeply at her husband and gritted her teeth, "Let's go." She took the lead and fled the lake. The others had no choice but to flee. They could only hear the rumbling sounds of fighting behind them. The sky shook as if the end of the world had arrived. Everyone had already fled far away, but the rumbling sounds of fighting were still ear-piercing. It was as if they were right next to their ears. There are dead people. Suddenly, someone shouted. There were dead bodies lying in the grass beside the road. Tang Jing glanced and immediately determined, these people are from the Imperial Advisor's residence. When they were chasing the Imperial Advisor earlier, they did not see this corpse. This meant that they had just died. There are more in front. Someone exclaimed. There are more here. There are more over there. Chapter 697. In this Imperial Preceptor's residence, there was only one person who could cause this kind of lethality, the 100 Faces Star Lord. Tang Zheng looked around and didn't find Junko's figure among the corpses. He didn't know whether she escaped or was killed. In a flash, everyone finally came to the edge of the Imperial Preceptor's residence. Tang Zheng and Li Xiaotian looked at each other and were overjoyed, exclaiming, "The thick fog is gone." There was no fog in front of them, and the winding path extended forward under their feet. It must be the 100 Faces Star Lord who broke the protective formation of the Imperial Preceptor's residence. Tang Jing guessed. Li Xiaotian nodded, this was the only explanation. If they rushed out, then everyone could escape. Tang Jing stopped and looked back. The faint sound of fighting could be heard, but he didn't know what the situation was. Should we wait for him? Tang Jing asked. Lan Yu looked back deeply and said resolutely, no, he will definitely find a way to escape and then come find us. As a couple for decades, Lan Yu still had strong confidence in Wu Junshan. Well, then we will go first. Tang Jing didn't hesitate and waved his hand, and everyone left the Imperial Preceptor's residence along the winding path. When he saw the bustling streets again, Tang Jing felt as if he was in a different world, and the others also felt their bodies relax. Speaking of which, this time they really had to thank the 100 Faces Star Lord. If he hadn't come to disturb them, they would have to go through a bloody battle to escape from Yamada no Orochi, and perhaps more people would be sacrificed. Now, it was the best result. I will go first. Li Xiaotian looked at Tang Zheng and said goodbye with a complicated expression. Tang Zheng looked at her deeply and said, next time, don't let me see you again. Li Xiaotian revealed a bitter smile. I'm afraid that will be very difficult to achieve. In the end, the Li Palace and Tang Zheng were already standing on opposite sides of each other. Given the style of the Li Palace, Li Xiaotian was well aware that it was absolutely impossible for the two sides to meet. Perhaps the next time they met, the situation would be even grimmer. Victory and defeat would be decided, perhaps even, life and death. This was no longer something she could control. Tang Jing also understood this point and said in a deep voice, then you should take care of yourself. When the time comes, life and death will depend on your own ability. Li Xiaotian was speechless. He turned around and disappeared into the sea of people. Looking at the direction she disappeared in, Tang Zheng could not help but feel a little complicated. Both of them had gone through so much to reach this point in the end. It was really fate that made fools of people. Let's go as well, Tang Zheng said, calming himself down. This group of people was like a clay ox entering the sea in the crowd. They did not cause much of a ripple as they quickly distanced themselves from the imperial advisor's mansion. As night fell, everyone arrived at a remote residence. After confirming that no one else had discovered their whereabouts, they knocked out the owner and moved in. It was already inconvenient for so many people to stay in a hotel, but they couldn't travel long distances because the most important thing right now was to save Wu. Wu was already on the verge of death. The goo worm had completely wrapped around her heart, and it could stop beating at any time. Lan Yu stroked the hair on Wu's forehead and said emotionally, "This child, Wu, has had a tough life since he was young. I never thought that he would have to suffer like this today." Tang Zheng could not hide the pain in his eyes. In his mind, he could not help but recall bits and pieces of her. It was like a movie, flashing back and forth. Whoosh! He took a deep breath and said firmly, "I promise to save her. I must find a way to get along with her. Right, we definitely can't just watch her lose her life like that." Lan Yu nodded in agreement, but immediately frowned. "I don't know the way of the apricot forest, so I'm helpless." "Tang Zheng, do you have a way?" Tang Zheng calmed down and started to think. His medical skills were only half-baked, so he was afraid that he would not be able to deal with this goo worm. The goo technique was a type of magic, and in the end, saving her would still depend on magic. What kind of magic could he use? For a moment, he was in a terrible fix and had no clue. "I have to give it a try no matter what. Since the goo worm has such a huge reaction to the innate qi, it might be because it's afraid of my innate qi." Tang Zheng's heart moved, and he decided to take the risk. A strand of innate qi followed his meridians and arrived at Wu's heart. Immediately, the goo worm's reaction became intense. Its ugly body quickly shrank inward, trying to avoid Tang Zheng, as if it wanted to drill into Wu's heart. "Damned goo worm, come out." Tang Zheng's expression changed slightly. His genuine qi surged and wrapped around one of the tentacles, trying to pull the goo out. However, the head of the goo worm had already drilled into his heart, leaving Tang Zheng helpless. "Ah!" Marshall suddenly let out a mournful scream, his body convulsing. Lan Yu's expression changed greatly as she shouted, "Wu!" Marshall's eyes were tightly shut, unable to reply. She was already on the verge of death, her consciousness weak. "Tang Zheng, how is it?" Lan Yu asked anxiously. Tang Zheng's forehead was already covered in sweat. He said, "It's not easy. I'll do my best. You must save her." Tang Zheng nodded and mobilized even more true qi to wrap around the entire heart. He tried to drill into the heart and destroy the goo worm. Suddenly, Marshall's body stopped twitching, and even his breathing became very weak. His heart almost stopped beating. "Shit! This goo worm is up to something." The goo worm had obviously sped up the speed at which it killed its host. Helpless, Tang Zheng could only withdraw his genuine qi from her heart. Her heartbeat sped up a bit, and her breathing became a bit stronger. Tang Zheng was like dead ash, he was extremely dejected. This method still did not work. Looking at Marshall, who was like a sleeping beauty, and clearly feeling the life force gradually fading from her body, Tang Zheng felt as if a knife was being twisted. Lan Yu sighed inwardly. She understood the feeling of being unable to reverse the situation. Back then, when Tang Zheng died, she had almost collapsed and had nothing left to live for. At this moment, Tang Zheng's mood was not much different. Lan Yu patted his shoulder and comforted him. "If Marshall knew about your feelings for her, even if there was nothing she could do, she would still be very gratified. Although the two of you usually don't get along, I can tell that she likes you." Tang Zheng did not say a word, but his heart ached even more. It's a pity that the heavens are not on your side. Otherwise, the two of you would really be a match made in heaven. Perhaps, the heavens are truly jealous of you, which is why they forcefully separated you two. I promised her that I would save her. Tang Zheng said in a daze. Lan Yu's eyes were moist as she choked with sobs and said, sometimes, a person's strength is really weak. It can't solve all problems. Tang Zheng obviously understood this point, but he really didn't want Marshall to die like this. At this last moment, he finally understood his own heart. The two of them had experienced so much together, and although it was not a pleasant period of time, Marshall had unknowingly walked into his heart and occupied a very important position. His teeth bit deeply into his lips, and blood flowed out from the corner of his mouth, but he was completely unaware. His eyes involuntarily turned red, and he couldn't help but lean over and gently kiss her lips. He had never kissed her so gently before. Although the two of them had already kissed each other a few times, that was when Tang Zheng's pure yang force was activated. His consciousness had already sunk into chaos, and it was more of an instinct than a feeling that came from the bottom of his heart. This kiss did not contain any desire, but it was filled with deep emotions, emotions that came from the bottom of his heart. The blood on Tang Zheng's lips dyed Marshall's lips red, and the blood seeped in through his teeth. As their lips parted, Tang Zheng carried her by the waist and said, I'll take her to admire the moonlight. I've never truly accompanied her before. Woo! A cry finally broke out of Lan Yu's throat. She hurriedly covered her mouth, but it was still difficult to hide her sobbing. Tears had already flowed out of her eyes as she stared at Tang Zheng's tall figure and Marshall who was in his embrace. Marshall's figure was tall, and being held in Tang Zheng's embrace, he did not feel like a little bird, but rather like a sleeping mermaid. Lan Yu nodded incessantly and said, you guys can go. Accompany her properly. Lan Yu knew that Marshall's life had already come to an end, and there was no other way. Tang Zheng had already accepted this reality, so he planned to accompany her on the final journey of her life. Tang Zheng's eyes were moist, his legs felt as if they were filled with lead, as heavy as 1,000 caddies. He walked towards the balcony step by step, as if he had used up all of his strength, and every step was incomparably heavy. He sat on the balcony with Marshall in his arms. The snow-white moonlight shone down from the sky, covering everything on the ground in a layer of silver. Bathed in the moonlight, Marshall's face was suffused with a holy radiance. Her exquisite facial features caused one's heart to palpitate. But at this moment, her face was haggard. She no longer had her usual valiant appearance, causing one's heart to ache so much that it was about to break. Tang Zheng gently caressed her cheek and muttered to himself, softly recalling the bits and pieces of the two of them. The scenes in his mind turned into words and came out of his mouth. Although it was simple, it was like the most moving words of love in the world, causing people to be moved. Lan Yu looked at the two of them from afar, and vaguely heard Tang Zheng's voice. She started to sob again, her tears wetting her cheeks, and she couldn't help but fall into self-blame. She already knew that a large part of the reason why she was able to be saved this time was because of Marshall. If she hadn't discovered some clues and given Tang Zheng a lot of benefits, Tang Zheng wouldn't have come to the island nation. Then these people would only have a dead end. Therefore, everyone's lives were saved by Wu Yu. However, she could save others, but she could not save herself. All of this was caused by that damned imperial advisor. If he had not given Wu that pill, then everything would have been fine. Tang Zheng looked at her face in a daze. He regretted and blamed himself. Why did he treat her so coldly in the past? He did not say a single word of gentleness to her. He even impatiently protected her at all times. Now, even if he wanted to do everything he could to get back all of this, it was impossible. One would only know how precious it was after losing it. He finally knew how precious she was, but he was going to lose her forever. Fate really played tricks on people. Ah. You're tuning into the Romantic Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.